welcome to the City of Bellevue Council meeting for October 25th, 2021. It's game night and we're all doing our best to support while we do the important business of the city. City Clerk, could you please do the roll call?
Yes, thank you. Mayor Robertson?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse?
Here.
Councilmember Barksdale?
Here.
Councilmember Lee?
Here.
Councilmember Robertson?
Here.
Councilmember Stokes?
Here.
And Councilmember Zahn?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Zahn, could you please lead us in the flag salute?
Yes, Mayor, happy to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. City Clerk, do we have anybody signed up for oral communications tonight?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This evening, there are 7 individuals signed up for oral communications. And with that, I will call the first speaker, who is Christian Dorset. Mr. Dorset, I do not see you connected by name. If you are connected with a phone, please use *9 or the raise hand function. Okay, we will circle back to Mr. Dorset. I do not see any hands. The next 3 sequential speakers have signed up as a group and each will be allotted their 3-minute time. They have a presentation to go with their speaking points. I will be tracking their time separately and we'll start their presentation and call the first speaker, who is Salman Taj. Mr. Taj, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. And thanks for the opportunity to speak to the council today. My name is Salman Taj, and I would like to bring your attention to the growth of the sport of cricket in our region, especially East Side, Bellevue included. If you could go to the next slide, please. Yeah, as you could see, I think cricket is the 2nd most popular sport in the world. And it's no different in our region as well. As you could see from this slide, there are a number of people, whether it's adults, whether it's youth. We have around 600 cricketers in the city right now playing cricket very actively. 500 and more than 500 youth cricketers playing cricket as well. More than 2,000 people playing recreationally, including women and kids. And then there are a lot of games that are happening across the region. We are also having a very professional, first time ever, a cricket team representing Seattle called Seattle Thunderbolts. I'll talk about it a little later. In general, there is a lot of activity in the city, in the region when it comes to cricket, and it's growing. We have almost it's the amount of kids, especially the youth, who are playing cricket, is doubling every year. If I look at the last 2 years, there are multiple academies in the region, and there are 3 main adult leagues as well as youth leagues that are being run in the city right now. In general, the main message is that cricket is growing in the entire country of the US, and it's no different in Seattle region as well. Let's go to the next slide, please. And if you want to look at how our kids from Seattle are doing nationally, this is a good metric to look at. MLC, Major League Cricket, runs national tournaments throughout the year. And almost 20 cities are represented in those tournaments. Almost 1,000 kids come and play in various age categories, U11, U13, 15, 17, and 19. And if you could see from the slide, this year in 2021, Seattle was number 1 in 3 age categories, and 2 age categories, number 2 in 1, and number 6 in U17. And this shows that our kids are doing really, really well at a national level. And that's amazing. But you could notice that U19, our kids are not there. And one of the key reasons for that to be happening is because of the kind of infrastructure our kids are playing at. If you look at, as an example, Robinswood Park in Bellevue City has a great ground for cricket, but the pitch there is hard concrete with mat on top, and that's not how real cricket is played. Real cricket is played over natural turf. And our kids are lacking that ability to play on natural turf grounds, and as they grow older and compete with the similar kids from other regions, they are lagging behind.
Mr. Taj, your 3 minutes is up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the time. I just wanted to see that if we can get good infrastructure and better grounds for our kids and for the game of cricket. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taj. The next speaker on the list is Yegan Namani. And Mr. Namani, if you're connected, can you please raise your hand? Or there you are, thank you. Can you hear me, Mr. Namani?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Let's go. So next slide, please. So our talented kids are really looking forward to playing professionally in these 3 organizations. One is the USA Cricket, which is our national governing body. The second is Major League Cricket. So just like Major League Baseball, Major League Cricket is starting next year. And minor league cricket, which started this year, and Seattle Thunderbolts was one of them in there. But they don't have the right infrastructure to play in to kind of get to that level yet. Right, next slide. And next year, when Major League Cricket is going to start, Seattle is one of the 7 cities being considered to give a team. So 6 cities will get a team. Seattle is being targeted as one of the cities that will probably get a team. If you go to the next slide, we'll see that Seattle team's ownership is very strong. We have got Satya Nadella and Soma Somsekhar who are Sounders, part owners of Sounders and CEO of Microsoft and managing director at Madonna. Those guys are part owners of this team. So we got strong ownership out here and very capable ownership. And if you go to the next slide, and not only that, we are targeting to bring ICC World Cup, World Cup for cricket here in 2024 to the United States. When we do that, there's a potential for 2 to 3 games, at least 2 to 3 games to come to Seattle, which means thousands of international travelers will come to our area and live in our hotels, spend money here, and actually come and watch games here. But for that, we need infrastructure to make happen. So if you go to the next slide, what I have here is Hagley Oval. Hagley Oval is in Christchurch, New Zealand, which is the perfect cricket community park. It is concrete light. If you look at it, there's just a small pavilion out there. And there's just banks around the pitch. And people just sit on the embankments and watch cricket. And they enjoy cricket like that. And in 2015, if you go to the next slide, when World Cup came to Hagley Oval, they put up temporary stands like this to support more audiences to come and see the cricket out there. And it was a big hit. After the World Cup happened, the temporary stands were all removed and it went back to a community park that it is, a multi-use community park. We want something like this here, and which is where the next slide is. And that is where we see that the Bellevue-owned land in Marymore Park is suited perfectly for this. It'll be a perfect community park where cricket can be played, World Cup can be hosted, concerts can be had, soccer can be played, and kids can just have fun running around. And that is the park that we're talking about to kind of see, we need support from all of you to see if we can make that dream happen and really have a World Cup come here, have international travelers come here, have a major league team come here, have our kids play there and grow well with cricket and actually do professionally well.
Mr. Namani, your 3 minutes is up. Thank you for your thoughts tonight. The third and final speaker on this topic is Mr. William Swan. Mr. Swan, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Your time begins now.
Hi, Bellevue Council. My name is Will Swan. For the last 2 years, I've led the infrastructure projects for Major League Cricket across the US. If you go to the next slide, please. A little bit about, I guess, what Juggin touched on. We've been working closely with HKS, who are an architectural firm that has built stadiums from SoFi Stadium, Optus Stadium in Australia, all the way down to minor league baseball and smaller soccer venues. So they have a lot of prestige in, I guess, the sporting landscape. We've worked with them on a number of kind of key design principles. I think the most important thing is to recognize that our venues are able to host the top tier of international cricket like the World Cup. But we also recognize that there is a need for them to be, I guess, centers of community, places for community events and concerts, and to have a multi-use purpose beyond just holding high level and high standing cricket events. So these key design features are part of what we hope to bring to Marymore Park and have a utilization of this venue beyond just cricket. If I go to the next slide as well, please. In terms of what we've been doing, as Jagan mentioned, there are 6 cities that will be the founding members of Major League Cricket. Across the US over the last 2 years, we've been heavily engaged with a number of cities from California, Texas, all the way to the East Coast. In these, processes, we've dealt with a number of different cities and counties and municipalities and have built up, I think, a strong level of experience and expertise in going through this process. These projects have ranged from larger stadiums that we're building down in Texas, public partnerships, as well as new builds and existing renovations and upgrades of existing facilities. So, I think we've built up and certainly have the experience and understand, I guess, some of the needs and requirements, not just for us, but as well as for the municipalities that we deal with to make sure these venues get used as much as possible, for cricket as well as outside of cricket. If you go to the next slide, please. One project, that I think is a real flagship for us and a little bigger than what's planned at Marymore Park is our stadium down in Grand Prairie in Dallas. We've taken a long-term lease on a minor league baseball stadium down there, spending a significant amount to upgrade that to be a 7,500 capacity, which will be a kind of key location that will help us bring the World Cup and major international matches into the US. So I think, our plans at Marymore Park, to support cricket in the US and bring these international games is incredibly important. We definitely look forward to working with you all and really hope that you'll support this so we can bring, like I said, not just major international cricket to Seattle, but also enhance the park and community elements, that'll also be used for.
Thank you, Mr. Swan. Your 3 minutes is up. And with that, I will call the next speaker, who is Matt Jack. Mr. Jack, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, council members. On behalf of the Bellevue Downtown Association, located at 10900 Northeast 4th Street, Bellevue, Washington, 98004. I say that because we moved offices recently and we're very excited. I wish to convey support for a pair of comprehensive plan amendments under consideration later tonight. Our positions were processed through multiple committee meetings, reviewed and approved by our BDA Board of Directors, and we have shared these comments before both the Transportation and the Planning Commission months ago. And I note that just to sort of share that we have been tracking these comp plan amendments throughout their life cycle. Regarding the Dash's proposal for new land use designations for its 2 properties, this update advances Dash's redevelopment plans to increase its number of affordable housing units. This outcome is consistent with the Wilburton vision and the city's housing goals, and it provides Dash the certainty and initiative to jumpstart its work early, especially with the Wilburton rezone process forthcoming. These are great outcomes for everybody. And then regarding the proposed transportation elements, we support this update for 2 key reasons. Number 1, these policy updates support Bellevue's ongoing work to complete the mobility implementation plan by allowing the city to examine and consider a wider range of mobility options. And number 2, these policy updates ensure Bellevue remains positioned to fulfill the state's concurrency requirements. Shifting to a multimodal policy and standard is a big change for the city, and we plan to track its progress for unintended consequences and ensure it considers emerging modes. But overall, we see this update as a strong move for the city and its ability to more accurately address and account for the true impacts of all trips, as well as prepare and accommodate for future growth. So with that said, I want to thank you for your leadership as you multitask many different important topics. And I want to thank city staff for supporting the city by programming numerous agendas and organizing all the work. And then lastly, thank the Planning and Transportation Commissions for working through all the little details. That's all I've got for this evening, and I appreciate your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Jack. The next speaker on the list is Vic Bishop. Mr. Bishop, can you hear me?
I can, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Hold on one second while we reset the timer.
Well, while that's going on, thank you, Mayor Robertson and the council for holding this discussion on the comprehensive plan amendments this evening. That's item 21700 on your agenda tonight. My name is Victor Bishop, and I am representing the Eastside Transportation Association. I'm the legislative chair of ETA, and I'm here to support the recommendation of the Planning Commission related to relieving congestion. The Planning Commission has recommended to the council that it retain the concept of relieve congestion in the comprehensive plan. ETA agrees with the Planning Commission's recommendation. The best way to implement the Planning Commission's recommendation is to retain the existing policy, which is TR2, and it's very simple, and it states, strive to reduce congestion and improve mobility. Striving to reduce congestion is consistent with the multimodal policy changes to the transportation element recommended by the Planning Commission. There's no inconsistency here. In May of this year, the council approved the transportation implementation plan. It has 69 local city projects that would increase capacity. In addition to the city TIP, WashDOT has 13 identified projects on I-405 in or approaching Bellevue that will increase capacity. There is no lack of projects to reduce congestion. You will hear tonight, potentially, that, oh, we can't do anything more. That's nonsense. We got 69 projects on the list that you approved that will increase capacity. The voters approved a property tax congestion relief levy a few years ago to reduce neighborhood congestion. They agreed to tax themselves more money to relieve congestion. You are going to be asked to change the language to manage congestion instead of relieve congestion. Manage congestion simply means that you can allow more congestion. The MIP, the Multimodal Implementation Plan, which the Transportation Commission is working on but has not been approved, it's got all the new targets, not standards, but targets for the 4 different modes. Those targets allow more congestion in the city of Bellevue. That is the intention. We at ETA request that the council retain the language of TR2, which says strive to reduce congestion. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. The next speaker on this evening's list is David Heldreth. Mr. Heldreth, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Thank you so much. So I'm actually speaking not on an item on the agenda, but towards a recommendation that the city looks into the decriminalization of psychedelic substances and entheogens. These include items such as mescaline, which can be derived from peyote cactus and others, LSD, psilocybin, and other compounds, which have been shown to be able to treat things such as PTSD in veterans, depression, anxiety, and also addiction for items such as opiates, which our community and others in the Northwest, as well as the United States, are currently being afflicted by greatly. Although you may seem to think that drug use makes drug use worse, there are classes of drugs that are anti-addiction. And so psychedelics should be looked at for those purposes. In that vein, Texas has recently legalized the research into these compounds to treat veterans and drug addicts. If the state of Texas can be doing this, then why is Washington state lagging behind? Recently, the Supreme Court of Washington ruled that it was unconstitutional to keep the current drug policy. As such, we recently had a time where drugs were decriminalized. I didn't see a wave of deaths. I didn't see a wave of violence. There is no reason to continue these failed policies. Instead, we can move towards legalizing and decriminalizing items that not only are not harmful, but can be beneficial. And so I believe that Bellevue should pass a proposition similar, or sorry, a initiative, or I guess actually the word would be proposal, to legalize or decriminalize psychedelic substances. Seattle recently passed such an ordinance, and they're working on that now. Oakland has already done the same thing. Similarly, these items are also used traditionally in religions which predate Christianity. If we, during prohibition of alcohol, could create carve-outs to allow religious groups to use alcohol in ceremonies, then it is only prejudice rather than logic that dictates that we keep psychedelics illegal and instead continue prohibition. So if items such as ayahuasca, which the Supreme Court of the United States has deemed is protected for religion, is not protected currently in Bellevue or by the Washington State. However, I believe a court case taking this to the Washington State Supreme Court would rule that it was protected. New Hampshire just ruled, their Supreme Court, the same thing, that their definition, which pretty much mirrors Washington State's definition for religious protection, requires that psychedelics be allowed for religion. So in order to protect our veterans, our drug addicts, and to keep people out of jail, as well as protect religious freedom, please legalize and decriminalize psychedelics.
Thank you, Mr. Hildreth. That is the end of our pre-registered list. At this point, we do have a few minutes left of oral communications. If there is anyone connected to this call who would like to make oral communication to the council, please use the raise hand function or *9 if you're connected with a phone. I should say that we have reached the 3 people in support of cricket, so it cannot be on that topic. And Mayor, I do not see any additional hands, as well as I do not see Mr. Dorsett connected from the beginning. So that would end oral communications.
Mr. Hildreth, can you hear me? Yes, can you hear me?
What am I hearing here?
That looks, yes, that sounded like some feedback from Mr. Hildreth.
Okay.
So I've muted him now. Thank
you.
Okay,
thank you. So I had a question for Councilmember Zahn. As a liaison to the Parks Board, is the cricket idea being taken up by the Parks Board? And if it's not, can it be?
Well, to answer your question, one, as part of the Parks and Open Space Plan, cricket is one of the sports that is named in the plan. I don't believe, though, that the Parks and Open Space Plan directly lines up with the timing that they may be interested in for that space. So if we were interested in entertaining that, I think we would have to direct the Parks Board to initiate some work looking at that in more detail.
Mr. Miyake, is there a way to, oh, sorry, Councilmember Zahn.
Oh, I was just going to finish and say that I would be interested in initiating such a thing if there were interest amongst my colleagues.
Mr. Miyake, is there a way to do that at this meeting tonight? Can we, with head nods, initiate that, or do you need some?
Yes, Mayor, if that is the wish of the council, it's certainly something that we could advance to the Park Board tonight, again, with the concurrence of the council.
And so we could do head nods on this without it being an agenda item?
I'm going to actually have to turn to our city clerk to answer that question. Charmaine?
If the council is providing direction to the Parks Board, I would suggest that you do that at a future meeting, but I'm unclear what the total ask is here.
So maybe next Monday at council business, council members can bring up the idea of moving the conversation of whether we can have cricket at Marymore Park as described to the Parks Board to discuss and make a recommendation on. So I see Councilmember Robertson has her hand raised, but I don't hear you yet. You're muted, Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. So I'm interested in having that conversation. I was looking at the size of cricket pitches. They're about the size of about more than 2 football fields and more than 2 Little League fields. So they're really big. So before we would initiate the work, I would want staff to at least look and see if we have any land that is the right size before we, and also to understand the Parks Board's work plan to make sure that we can fit this in. Because remember, at last Monday's meeting, we just initiated a remaster plan of Airfield Park, which I'm hoping will be fast tracked. And so before we throw another thing on there, I'd want to understand how it fit together. I absolutely think that we should try to find a way to make cricket available in Bellevue. But on the other hand, I just need to know more. I'm not ready to do it on a head nod. That's all.
They've been working on this for over a year. So I'm going to not discuss this any longer, and we will just move it to next meeting where we can have a discussion of it then. Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, so we have, I think, 3 study session items or 4 study session items tonight. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce?
I cannot hear anything.
Pardon me? Mr. Miyake, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Mayor.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I cannot hear anything.
Okay, Councilmember Lee, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I think you are unique in not being able to hear what's going on. So maybe
Charmaine, if she could take a look into this.
Yeah, we've had staff on the line, but he did just respond. So now Councilmember Lee, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, so I think his issues are resolved. Thank you.
Okay.
Hey,
go ahead, Mr. Miyake.
Okay, sure. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, council members. As you mentioned, we have 4 study session topics this evening, and the first study session item on your agenda is the proposed residential occupancy land use code amendment to remove occupancy limits for unrelated adults from the land use code. And just by way of background, this land use code amendment is in response to recent state legislation, Senate Bill 5235, which addressed local authority to limit the number of unrelated persons residing within a dwelling. This land use code will replace the interim official control that was adopted in July of this year to bring the land use code into immediate compliance with state law. Tonight, staff is looking for council direction to bring this matter back for formal adoption at a future meeting. Joining us this evening is Mike Brennan, as well as Trisna Tanis and Caleb Miller, all from the Development Services Department, as well as our Planning Commission Chair, Mohammed Makhloushian, excuse me for mispronouncing your name. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mike to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Miyake. Just a couple of quick opening comments, and then I'll hand it over to Trisna Tanis and Caleb Miller. They'll give the staff report. This is a code amendment, land use code amendment that would limit or address residential occupancy limits. It would remove the limits that are currently in place as required to comply with direction under state law. That was initiated in on July 25th. Council will recall that there is an interim official control ordinance in place currently to address this issue within the code. And this is advancing the permanent land use code amendment for future code development. So I will hand it over to Trisna Tanis, who will walk through the staff report with Caleb Miller. Trisna.
Thank you, Mike. Next slide, please. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newhouse, council members. For action tonight, we are asking for council to direct staff to finalize the LUCA ordinance for final action at a future meeting. Next slide, please. For our agenda on our staff report here, we will start with an explanation of the state legislation enacted by Senate Bill 5235, which gave rise to the interim official control in this LUCA that Mike just spoke of earlier. We had done an audit of the existing regulations for single-family residential use, as well as just residential use in general, and we will provide information about these regulations. We will then explain the components of the proposed LUCA and then describe the public engagement as well as the process that we've been following for this LUCA. We will then turn the presentation to Planning Commission Chair Malakuchan to present the Planning Commission recommendation. Next slide, please. In this past legislative session, the state legislature passed and the governor signed into law Senate Bill 5235, which became effective on July 25th. The bill was codified as a new section in the RCW, specifically RCW 35A21314, and states that a city may not regulate or limit the number of unrelated persons that may occupy a household or dwelling unit, other than occupant limits on group living arrangements or short-term rentals, or limits that are generally applicable health and safety provisions. The Washington State Legislature, in passing this bill, wanted to remove barriers and restrictions that limit housing and affordable housing opportunities. At that time, the Land Use Code defined family as a maximum of 4 unrelated adults, while not restricting the number of related adults or occupants that may live together as a functional equivalent of family. The Land Use Code also limited occupancy of other dwellings, such as ADUs and rooming houses. To quickly and timely conform the city's regulations, the council did adopt the IOC on July 12th and held a public hearing on August 2nd. On August 2nd, council also initiated development of permanent regulations to be processed by the Planning Commission. If council does adopt this permanent LUCA that are in front of you tonight, it will replace the interim official control. Next slide, please. At council's initiation of this LUCA, and after that initiation, staff began a review of the regulations, both in the Bellevue City Codes as well as the Land Use Code that apply to dwelling units, both single family and multifamily units. For reference and context, we wanted to let council know of these regulations. The building and fire codes do require certain standards for fire safety. Likely the most notable is that there has to be adequate egress from bedrooms. Also, the city building official and fire marshal do have authority to require corrections, including preventing use and occupancy of homes and buildings that present a danger to the occupants and neighboring properties. The building code also requires that improvements, such as converting a garage into living space or adding a bedroom, for instance, must be permitted and inspected to ensure safety measures have been taken. Unpermitted construction is considered a violation, and code compliance can take actions to require corrections of that violation. The city also has a number of other codes, such as the Uniform Housing Code, which council may remember was incorporated into the Bellevue City Code as its own chapter. The Uniform Housing Code has standards such as for adequate sanitation facilities, heat, light, and air. The city also has health and safety codes, including noise control code to minimize the harmful effects of excessive noise, and nuisance code that prohibits nuisance and trash accumulation. Additionally, the transportation and right-of-way codes have regulations pertaining to parking and traffic on public streets. These codes and their requirements are remaining unchanged so that they can continue to protect health and safety. Also, the city has a few land use code provisions that are relevant to residential dwellings. The land use code prohibits parking or driving on unpaved surfaces such as grass or lawn or gravel. And also the city has specific requirements and restrictions regarding transient lodging. in residential dwellings, most of which were adopted as part of the single family rental ordinance back in 2015. These land use code requirements also are remaining and are not changing. Next slide, please. With that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Caleb Miller, who will provide more information on that single family rental ordinance. And then this narrowly scoped components of this recommended LUCA and then the engagement process that we've been following. Caleb?
Thank you, Trisna, and good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of the City Council. So as Trisna mentioned, Ordinance number 6223, also known as the Single Family Rental Ordinance, was adopted in 2015 and imposed certain new requirements, such as to reduce the number of unrelated adults who can be considered a family from 6 to 4. It also established regulations for rooming houses, which are basically dwelling units rented on an individual room basis and are not owner occupied. Under this ordinance, these uses were limited to no more than 4 rooms being rented to no more than 5 adults at any one time. And finally, as Tristan noted, transient lodging regulations were also established as part of this LUCA, including regulations for boarding houses and bed and breakfasts, which are owner-occupied dwellings with rooms rented out to other people. These have a limit of 2 rooms being rented to 2 people at any one time. Additionally, short-term vacation rentals or transient lodging have a requirement to obtain a home occupation permit when in a single-family home. Under this land use code amendment, most of these provisions will remain in place. The proposed amendments are really intended to be targeted and narrow in scope and are only meant to address the occupancy limitations specifically called out in SB 5235, which brings us to the next slide. So to go through the different components of this LUCA, staff are proposing the following. First, to remove the limitation on the number of unrelated adults who can be considered a family. And this is provided that they still operate as a single housekeeping unit, which means that all occupants of a dwelling must have access to the entire home and share generally the responsibilities, upkeep, and so on of the dwelling. I will note the single housekeeping unit definition did prior to the IOC had a requirement for all occupants to be on a single lease. This does constitute regulation of occupancy, and so is proposed to be removed from this definition. In addition, there are a few specific housing uses that have their own occupancy limits, which are proposed to be removed. First, the chapter on accessory dwelling unit regulations pointed to the family definition that we've mentioned. So this is proposed to be removed. Boarding houses and bed and breakfasts, as I noted, are limited to 2 people at most. This is still applicable in transient lodging situations, but we are proposing that for any non-transient or more than 30-day durations of stay, there is no occupancy limit because it's just a permanent residency at that point. That being said, the 2-room maximum will still apply in both cases. And finally, rooming houses, which are currently limited to 5 people at most, are proposed to not have this occupancy limit. However, the remainder of regulations in place for rooming houses that were adopted under Ordinance 6223 are to remain in place, such as minimum parking requirements of 1 stall per room being rented, and a maximum of 4 bedrooms that can be rented at any one time. Again, these amendments are really intended to be narrow in scope and keep in place as many of the existing regulations for intensity, health, and safety as allowable under state law. Bellevue residents are encouraged to continue reporting possible code violations, even if you aren't sure it is a violation. You are encouraged to report these. One way to do this is using the My Bellevue app. Once something is reported, it is routed to the appropriate department to investigate. For instance, code compliance will respond to violations related to private property and development. Our transportation staff will respond to complaints in the right-of-way. And then, of course, the police department is on call for any traffic and parking violations as well. So moving on, this LUCA included 2 primary modes of public outreach. The first are the standard process 4 requirements for LUCAs, which included the notice of application, required public hearings, as well as noticing for those public hearings. And to this point, we have had 1 public hearing with the Planning Commission, as well as a courtesy public hearing with the East Bellevue Community Council. Additionally, a city webpage was created for members of the public to learn more about the LUCA and keep track of its progression. Staff contact information was also included, so people may provide comments to staff. And at this time, one public comment has been received by staff. The commenter expressed concerns over increased activity, parking demand, and traffic as a result of this LUCA. In response, staff did point back to the existing codes and regulations that we've discussed that are in place to address many of those concerns. Next, this is a schedule of the LUCA's progression and looking forward. The LUCA is anticipated to be adopted prior to the expiration of the IOC ordinance on January 12th, but of course, Council does have the ability to extend it if necessary. As I noted, the EBCC did hold a courtesy hearing on October 5th. During this hearing, members of the public did attend and provide comments related to overcrowding and parking concerns. EBCC members generally echoed those concerns, as well as ways to increase public engagement. And they also questioned whether the state's intention of promoting housing affordability would actually result from the removal of occupancy limits. And again, staff did reiterate the existing codes and regulations in place to address many of these concerns. Additionally, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on this LUCA on October 13th. And tonight we have Chair Malakuchin of the Planning Commission to provide an overview of their discussions and recommendation to Council. So with that, I'll pass it to him if he is available.
Yeah.
Hello.
Thank you, Caleb. Thank you so much. As you saw during the Planning Commissioner's September 8th study session, we didn't hear any public comments. Therefore, we just discussed the implication of the LUCA and directed staff to prepare the LUCA for a public hearing. The public hearing was held on October 13th. The only public comment was from Chair Hammer of the East Bellevue Community Council. She provided an overview of their discussion during hearing on this LUCA. During our deliberations, the Commission discussed potential impacts of the proposed LUCA, such as increase for an on and off street parking, increased traffic, and potentially dangerous or overcrowded living conditions. However, we concluded that the existing regulations in the Bellevue City Code and Land Use Code would address these concerns, and that there are many avenues for community members to report possible violations. The Planning Commission recommended unanimously, with one commissioner absent, that the City Council adopt the Residential Occupancy Land Use Code amendment to remove occupancy limits for residential uses without any modification. We found that the LUCA meets the decision criteria of Land Use Code 20.30J.135 and is consistent with the comprehensive plan, enhance the public safety and welfare, and is not contrary to the interests of the citizen and property owners of the City of Bellevue. This recommendation is included in the Planning Commission resolution as attachment A of your packet. Now I will pass it back to Caleb to finish the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. And so with that, staff is seeking direction to prepare the LUCA ordinance for final action at a future meeting, and I'll pass it back to the mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. And Chair Malakuchin, thank you so much for being here tonight. And if we have questions for you, we will ask you. So I'm going to let Councilmember Barksdale begin since he's liaison to the Planning Commission, and then followed by Robertson, Stokes, liaison, Deputy Mayor, and myself. So Councilmember Barksdale.
Thank you, Mayor. No questions, just want to thank the Commission and I support the Commission's recommendation.
Okay, Councilmember Robertson.
All righty. Yeah, thank you for the work. So Chair Malakuchin, I don't see you on the screen. Oh, there you are. There's too many people on here. When this came to council and we did the IOC, I had questions and comments to staff about occupancy limitations because we don't have any in our residential code. and many cities don't. They're not in the International Fire Code. I did find in the International Property Maintenance Code that there is occupancy limitations, which I thought were very helpful. They're for the public health and safety. And I asked staff to bring that to the Planning Commission. So my question is, did the Planning Commission have the opportunity to look at the standards in the International Property Maintenance Code on occupancy as part of this work?
I think it brought to our attention, yes.
Okay, so I guess the question for staff is, was that in front of them or for Chair Malakushin, and why was it not folded into these standards?
So thank you, Councilmember Robertson, for that question. So we do recall your question during the IOC discussions on suggesting the International Property Maintenance Code provisions relating to occupancy limits in that code. As you know, the IPMC, the International Property Maintenance Code, is not a code that is part of the Bellevue City Code. The city does not have that in place. And our consideration of that we were thinking that it would make sense to look at that more holistically if when we do look at the IPMC for incorporation into the city code. The IPMC did have kind of number of occupants per square foot. That is the governor that they have in there. We also looked at that in the context of administration and enforcement of that those set of provisions. And we felt that it would be, there could be challenges with doing that as a one-off and not including the more comprehensive look and analysis of the IPMC as a whole. So that's the the extent of our consideration and analysis of that.
All right, so I support the revisions, but I would also like to see additional occupancy limitations. I understand these limitations are just for ADUs, rooming houses, boarding houses, and B&Bs. But when you have a room that can be with 2 adults and any number of minor children, you literally could have a 120 square foot room with 10 people in it. And that is not safe, and that is not healthy. And so the International Property Maintenance Code Section 404, which has been adopted, I know it's not a mandatory adopted code, but a lot of cities who have standards for occupancy have adopted something like it as a standalone provision. It also has the benefit of being consistent with the federal fair housing laws with regard to occupancy. So what it is it's 70 square feet for a bedroom for one occupant and an additional 50 square feet for additional occupants in a bedroom. To me, that seems very, very reasonable. It seems very safe. I support doing what we did, but I support also going further. I would like to see the city look at the IPMC as a whole. I think it's a very useful code. I use it in my legal practice for other cities, but regardless of that, I think that we should look at those occupancy standards because, like I said, they've been adopted in other cities who also don't have the IPMC and are consistent with federal fair housing laws. So I don't know where that leaves us, but I would like to have some minimum standards in here for public health and safety that go a little bit further than what is in the code. And I'll listen to the rest of my colleagues if they support doing that. I'm happy to bring forward an amendment to that if needed, if it can't come forward relatively quickly. So those are my comments for now. Thank you.
Or does somebody want to respond to that? Or Chair Malakushin, did you have anything you wanted to say to that?
I think Trisna captured the response that we heard and kind of convinced us that for now we move forward with what we have in front of us.
Okay, thank you.
I'll provide just a real quick response to Councilmember Robertson. So the IPMC, the International Property Maintenance Code, is a code that we will be including in our broader assessment when we do the next code update. I know it's a timing question for you as well, but that is something that also provides language for dangerous buildings and related to unsafe conditions, as well as housing requirements or housing code requirements, as you're mentioning. So it is a comprehensive code. It also has property maintenance requirements that may, in some instances, go a little further than the council may want to adopt directly. But that being said, it is a code that integrates well with the international codes that have been adopted by the city. And we can certainly and are planning to take a look at that code and bring it forward with the next update that occurs with the international codes.
Okay, thank you for that information. Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I agree with the presentation. I appreciate very much the work that's been done on this, and I think they've covered what we asked of them. I know we could overstudy this and micromanage it, and I don't think that's what we want to do. I think Councilmember Robertson's suggestions to look at this are fine. I just don't want us to get bogged down in it should be 5 feet, 10 feet, this much, this is not clean, this is clean, whatever. I think that's really a staff function, and we have codes, and as you said, this is all kind of rolled into it. And I hope this we don't find some ways to get crosswise with the intention of the state's regulation of this and end up taking a lot of time, energy, and money to do something that is kind of chasing some shadows in a sense. So I think we have a presentation of a very sound program, and the things that Councilmember Robertson mentioned are to look at. But again, I think we need to act quickly and get this put in place. And I think the Commission's done a great job of it. And I'm looking forward to staff bringing this forward and including these. And of course, we'll get a lot of public comments. So, but overall, I think it's a very responsible response to what the state is requiring. And I hope we can just move this along and get it put in place because it is going to be helpful to people in the growth of this city to be able to have more people having places to live and having better than what we've had before, where it's more kind of keeping people out instead of having people come in. And we'll manage it. And a lot of cities have done this for decades. And I think we're getting to a place where we're really being very inclusive in all the types of housing we have, so we can really get people out off the street and in housing. So if they're not housed, they're going to be on the street. So thanks really much for the work on this, and looking forward to our looking at it, improving it, and putting it forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Stokes. Councilmember Lee.
I want to thank the commission chair for doing good work on this. And I do have a couple of questions. One is why does state want to mandate this? Can you give me a quick half a minute? Somebody.
Sure, yes. I'm happy to do that. So the Washington State Legislature did know why they wanted to remove the occupancy limits in passing Senate Bill 5235. And in essence, they wanted to remove barriers and restrictions that limit housing opportunities and affordable housing opportunities. So that's the kind of the short answer, but really the most basic and foundational reason why the state that the state noted.
Yes, thank you. We all believe in that. You know, Bellevue is doing as much as a lot of we're doing it to encourage that. And my question is, when they did it, they consider all the things that we are considering, the staff has considered, and the commission has considered. And I understand that, you know, this affects very limited, application. So I, just off the bat, there's no question in my mind, except, when I heard Councilmember Robertson bringing out a specific, IPMC code, and they are based on rational reasons, size. And I also heard the staff saying, we have a lot of things. I'm comfortable with the changes because we have other regulations and codes, and we have enforcement tools. So I'm very happy about that. But I just want to be sure, though, our code, our enforcement is going to be compatible based on the some specific criteria, such as the IPMC code. We don't want to make it difficult, but we can enforce it. But if the proposition, if the arrangement makes it challenging, difficult, and not possible to enforce, it doesn't make sense for us to enforce it, right? Because, you know, when they break the law, it's already broken. It doesn't do much good, especially if we leave it to other people to do that, who maybe, whatever base reason they want to do it, we're gonna give them some criteria, some guideline. So two questions. One is, our enforcement rule, regulation, is it compatible with some standards that people are not going to break laws unless they intentionally do it, then we can go after them. And two, you know, what kind of you know, if people who wants to allow people to live with them, we can do it anyway, right? I mean, I have just two of us living at home. I can invite 2 more people to live in that house. And if you all do that, you know, 60,000 people in Bellevue. I mean, we have 60,000 people or more have a place to stay, but we're not doing that, unfortunately. You know, so we have to depend on some regulation, some way of this government trying to do it, or nonprofits. But to do that, we got to have those criteria to be working on. So I'm just asking the question is, when we do enforcement, our code, are they compatible based on some rule and some standards, such as IPMC standards? So I kind of like to support Councilmember Robertson's point that making sure and that we have some standards. Two, the standards are compatible with our own, you know, prevention standards like safety, health, whatever, and that we can then enforce them, you know, reasonably. So can you say a few words about that?
Sure, I can start and maybe Mike can jump in, certainly. So to your question about compatibility and of our enforcement mechanism and enforcing our regulations that are in place now. So absolutely, I think that right now our code enforcement officers are certainly very committed and able to look at complaints and review them and investigate them and be able to address and respond to these complaints, whether or not to simply screen and answer questions of when a complaint comes in, but also then to take those next steps in investigation and then requesting corrections when there is a violation of the current codes. And our code compliance officers do this routinely. We do address a lot of transient lodging violations as well as unpermitted construction that happens and be able to ensure that corrections are being taken and we can abate the violations. So we believe there is a compatibility in our enforcement mechanisms and tools with our current development regulations. Mike,
yes, Mike, want to say a few words? Otherwise, I would make a quick comment.
Just quick. So we do two things. One is inform. Obviously, we try to get information out to the public so they understand the regulations. And as Trishna noted, we still have a number of regulations in place, even with this proposed amendment to the land use code, that are there to protect the neighborhood. So dealing with transient lodging, a number of issues related to permitting, dangerous building abatement, et cetera, when those sorts of complaints are received by our staff. So it is something that continues to get a lot of attention, and we do have both the regulation and the enforcement tools and staff with the city to enforce those rules. So
that's why I'm comfortable, because you have tools, you can enforce them. My question still, though, going back to the same question, when the state removed this limit, I don't know whether they are basing it on certain standards in reality. And when we enforce, we want to also know, are we enforcing based on certain realistic standards like IPMC? Because if we have unrealistic standards, we're going to be sure that we're going to be enforcing the laws unnecessarily, right? And we want to do that it is within certain realistic standards that if they break it, then we can enforce it. But we don't want them to break it because, that's not what we want to do, right? So there has to be some standard, some practice, some experience, some best case. And that's what I'm referring to. Are we setting those things up, with some criteria? Or are we just saying, hey, set a standard? So I think ultimately the question is, you don't have to answer that. I think it's really related to Councilmember Robertson's question. What it is realistic and how do we set it up? And number one, the state's removal is realistic? Or just arbitrarily throw a number?
Councilmember Lee, I think
that's it. So I'm done.
Yeah,
Let the staff either answer now or later, whenever. But this is my question. Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Do you feel like you've answered this already, or do you have more to say?
I'm not quite sure we have. I would just emphasize again that yes, we do have standards and we do enforce those. I think the standard that Councilmember Robertson is referring to is a more, let's call it a more precise standard for enforcing occupancy limits when it could be considered as unsafe or unsanitary. We can still intervene in using the building code and our abatement code when we discover situations that are not sanitary or unsafe for occupancy. And we do have those on occasion as well.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you. Well, so I appreciate this work, Chair Malakuchin and the Planning Commission and staff, and working so quickly to get the code updated. I do have, well, I guess one comment and then one interrelated question. So my comment is that I do think it's important, and I'm glad to know that we do have health and building code requirements in place so that our community can be assured that if we do have unsafe or unsanitary conditions, that there is code and code enforcement related to that. My question though is related to, I suppose a bit related to the comments we've been talking about with occupancy, and it is this. When I look at the 2020.140 on boarding houses and bed and breakfast, and I read about the limits on transient lodging, no more than 2 rooms rented to 2 adults plus children. So I'm trying to understand a scenario where my husband and I are, if we're from out of town, we're gonna come visit Bellevue, transient lodging. I'm bringing my adult daughter, her partner, and my mother, that if there's a room, if there's a house that actually has 4 bedrooms, they couldn't rent 3 rooms to us because they would violate this code. Is that correct?
That's correct, Councilmember Zahn. So there is a limitation on the number of rooms as well as the number of renters that may occupy those rooms. And that was put in place as part of that ordinance that Caleb spoke of earlier. And it really tried to address kind of the occupancy for transient lodging situation. So if in your example of kind of 3 adults, for instance, then an Airbnb in Bellevue would not be suitable for that situation.
Okay, so then I guess my question is, how did we come up with this as a criteria? Because I'm trying to imagine the fact that we would not be considered undesirables to be able to rent. And if the building actually had the rooms for us, why we would have this code with a limitation. And I suppose it goes to my second question, which is, as we talk about occupancies, as an immigrant from Hong Kong, where the square footage per occupant, I'm sure is probably smaller than the United States, I'm concerned about setting occupancy limits that may not be reflective of the fact that we're an international city and have many immigrants that may come from a living situation where the square footage of occupancy may not be the same. And so I'd just like to understand about how we came up with these numbers of the maximum of 2 rooms and 2 adults each.
And you're just talking about transient.
Yes.
Right? I mean, we have hotels too in Bellevue. It's not like there's no place to stay in Bellevue, but you're just talking about transient.
Yes.
Rental.
Yes. Okay. I'm just trying to understand how we came up with these limits.
So council members, maybe I should clarify. So if you had 3 adults in your family and a couple of minor children, for instance, an Airbnb in Bellevue has the maximum of 2 rooms with 2 adults in each room. So you could potentially take both rooms in a home for your family so to stay in. The other thing to note too, bed and breakfast regulations that you are speaking about is when they happen in owner-occupied single-family homes. So it is specific to single-family homes in single-family land use districts. And the intent, among other things, in that ordinance, the single-family rental ordinance, is really trying to protect single-family neighborhoods and neighborhood characters. So there is that limitation on the amount or the amount of rooms and the impacts that transient use of homes may have on neighborhoods, on single-family neighborhoods. There are different limitations if you're talking about multifamily districts, as well as districts that are in downtown, for instance.
Okay, I understand. Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the work by the Planning Commission staff on this. And I had a quick question first off is, if we did at this time wanted to take a look at those IMP standards, can we extend the IOC for an additional 6-month period while we look at that? Or do we really need to take action on this to stay compliant? And action on this tonight?
So we are looking for direction to finalize the LUCA for adoption at a future meeting in order to meet that January 12th expiration date. So as long as we can do that by that date, then there's no need to extend the IOC. However, if council would like to get further data or analysis done, it's likely that that IOC would have to be extended in order to accommodate the additional process.
Right, but would we be out of compliance if we extended the IOC on January 12th for additional time to examine this?
No, not at all. So
okay.
As long as the city extends the IOC.
Great. And then I had a question. So we're talking about that compatibility of enforcing the regulations and code compliance, et cetera. This was all there at the time, wasn't it back in 2015, correct? When we had some residents that brought forward a change to the LUCA. Those same code enforcement and regulations, those are all in place at that time, correct? Nothing has changed between now and then. My point is, I guess, and maybe my colleagues who were on the council at that time, those residents felt it necessary to bring forward a change to the LUCA in order to address a problem. They didn't feel that the enforcement of those regulations were enough at that time. So I'm just trying to understand why, at this point, we feel comfortable that we're going to be able to regulate the health and safety of these dwellings by allowing this to be enforced.
So thank you for that question, Deputy Mayor Nunez, and Mike, please add if I missed anything here. So Ordinance 6223 was adopted in 2015. There were a couple of IOCs, I believe, prior to the adoption of the final LUCA ordinance. And as Caleb noted in the presentation, 6223 actually encompassed and contained a lot more than the occupancy limits. So it contained the rooming house provisions, it contained bed and breakfast and boarding house provisions, as well as just kind of other related provisions. So, but you were right. I think most of the health and safety regulations, such as the building code and abatement of dangerous building, uniform housing code, for instance, were actually in place at that time, in addition to, and I think the genesis of Ordinance 6223 was really to address the rooming house violations or kind of conditions that were in place. These are the single room rentals that were occurring near Bellevue College in the Lake Hills neighborhood. And just to note, we're not, this LUCA would not change any of those the rooming house provisions, those would still be in place. So rooming houses are not allowed in single family districts.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you for answering that, Trisna. Appreciate that.
So I interpret this as a fine tuning of that ordinance we did in 2015, which was created to kind of protect abuse of single family neighborhoods. It certainly was never intended to not allow affordable housing in single family neighborhoods. And so this is, to me, a good fine tuning of it. I'm in support of it. I did have a question. Councilmember Robertson brought up the INP standards and how many individuals can be in a certain amount of space. Isn't that a fire code thing as well? I would imagine.
So for residential uses, single family residential uses, the fire code and the building code do not set a specific maximum occupant load for square footage. It really is at the discretion of the building official and the fire marshal in those circumstances to determine if we have an unsafe condition, depending upon how the building is being used, the condition of the building, etc. The International Property Maintenance Code does set, as Councilmember Robertson noted, more specific criteria that describe what's required for certain occupant loads in square footage of building area, which is fairly consistent with larger commercial buildings. There's, as you know, occupant loads are established by building area, but residential currently in the International Building Code and Fire Code are treated differently. So it is, again, at the discretion of the building official and the fire marshal. When an investigation determines that we have an unsafe condition, they can intervene and abate that condition.
So what's the difference between having it in the land use code amendment versus being something that the fire marshal would check on if somebody were to call it in?
So it's because it would be considered a building and fire safety requirement, it more consistently fits in with those codes. But if there are provisions in the city's land use code related to occupancy and safety, certainly that gives us enforcement capacity as well. I think from the enforcement provisions that are in the building and the fire code provide more specific criteria on how that enforcement applies and who has the authority as the building official and the fire marshal, who also have the credentials to make those sorts of interpretations. So it gets a little bit tricky to put that sort of language in a land use code, but again, it is a city code that is enforceable. So we would find the proper procedures to implement it if the council chose to do it.
Okay, because really, I think what was the whole reason that we were going for the ordinance is because it was so hard to enforce what we had written in the code at the time. And so that's interesting. So we have a motion, an option here in our packet that I know Councilmember Robertson would like to make an amendment to that. So Councilmember Stokes, did you want to say, and then Councilmember, well, let's start with Councilmember Barksdale, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'm just curious about what complaints or how many complaints that have we received related to this, maybe within the past year that turned out to be, I don't know, valid complaints. So I guess I'm trying to get a sense of, is there a need to tune it further, go beyond what the state ledge requirements are. And then second, I guess I would just say, how far do we go in determining whether someone's space is safe? I mean, where do we draw that line? Because if it's already accounted for in the building code and we already have a way to enforce it that way, I mean, do we need to put these extra policies in place, rules in place?
So I don't, the first question, Councilmember Barksdale, I'll have to refer to Trisna or Caleb on the number of complaints. I don't have that number off the top of my head. We might have to follow up on that. We do receive complaints. I don't believe it's a large number. Trisna or Caleb, do you have any specifics on that?
I don't have the exact number either, but as I work pretty closely with our code compliance folks, we do get complaints about improper use of single family homes, let's put it that way. Most of the time it's related to like they're seeing too many cars parked on the street, or they're seeing that sometimes it's related to transient lodging. They're seeing an ad, for instance, in an Airbnb. And those complaints, we do follow up with them on all of the complaints, but we do find a lot of it has to do more with transient lodging as opposed to kind of the number of occupants, say. Just wanted to also mention that the land use code does already allow for unlimited number of related adults. So this would be removing the unrelated part of the restriction there. So we have, we do we'll continue to monitor how, what happens, I guess, with this ordinance if it goes through.
Yeah, I would like to proceed without further modification. But
okay, thank you. Councilmember Stokes, did you have a comment?
Yes, I did. I think this has been fascinating. I don't know how anybody listening to this could really understand whether we know what we're talking about or what is before us or anything else. I'm a little, we're going down this rabbit hole again on these things. The LUCA said we have to amend definitions of family, single house, and single housekeeping unit. That seems pretty straightforward. And we can talk about the theoretical without knowing what this language is or what it really means. It's precisely. It also says remove limits for specific housing types. ADUs, boarding houses, and rooming houses are included. But we really haven't talked about what that means and what difference it would make. And yet we're talking as if we get into this thing where we just push more and more. We want to define it. We don't know what it is, and we end up wasting time and coming up with stuff that we go back later and didn't make any big difference. I'm just concerned that this is something that the state says we have to do. And it seems pretty straightforward. It doesn't say we have to change other things. I would like to see us zero in on what needs to be changed by state law. And we're not saying we have to change other things, but yet we're putting those in there, and we're going to end up spending a lot of time on that. And we want to push this out instead of getting it put in place. And then we've got Robertson to talk about. If you want to go back to time usage, we're making a mountain out of a molehill in a sense. And it makes it more difficult.
Thank you, Councilmember.
That's what bothers me. And I'd like
Does
to see
anybody else have a comment or question? Councilmember Lee. I can't hear you, Councilmember Lee. I'm sorry.
Councilmember Lee, you're muted.
This happened in 2015 at the Spiritwood neighborhood near Bellevue College because of the rooming house problems. And so it became a big thing. I remember the whole housing thing became a big topic for the city. So I'm just curious whether we talk to the Spiritwood folks. The reason I ask, this is such a challenging, difficult question, especially right now we talk about housing. In fact, when you mention the word, everybody says, what's housing, right? And so it's not easy to understand. And people who live there, they think their lives are affected by it. They want to understand better. Did we contact Spiritwood folks? And what if, they have responded? Or what do you think are the challenging educating some folks that they understand how they are impacted or not impacted? Can the staff say a few words about that?
Caleb or Trisna, can you talk about the public outreach that occurred with this land use code amendment?
Yes, we did not reach out to any specific neighborhood groups on this, but as we noted in the presentation, we did do our standard noticing procedures, which include notice of application in our weekly permit bulletin, gets published in the Seattle Times, as well as notices for all of the courtesy hearings and the public hearings that have been held for this LUCA. On top of that, we have our city webpage as well. All of that being said, as I noted, staff has only received one comment expressing some of the concerns that have been raised tonight. To the point about rooming houses specifically, I'll just say the language that we're proposing is very much targeted just to go after the occupancy limits. All of the other rooming house provisions are remaining in place, and that should address a lot of the issues that were raised back in 2015 about people making dormitories out of single family homes, so to speak. So yeah, that would be my response.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Zahn, followed by Councilmember Robertson.
Yeah, thank you. I would say that after listening to the staff comments and my colleagues, I support the staff recommendation and the Transportation Commission recommendation. And then my comment for why I would recommend that is because—
I think Councilmember Zahn, you mean the Planning Commission?
Oh, sorry, the Planning Commission. Yes, Chair Malakuchin. Sorry, yes. Let me be clear about that. And I would say the reason why is because what I heard is we already have the health and building code provisions in place. We have compliance and enforcement provisions in place. And this is where I want to make sure that just because we have a land use code amendment in front of us, that doesn't mean that every decisions we make that we're going to use the land use code as though every single nail is a hammer. So I just want to make sure that we're really intentional about the tools we use for what purpose. Thank you.
Councilmember Robertson.
I've had my hand up for quite some time. So a question for staff. I understand we have general health and safety codes in the building code, but is there, if there's, say there's, and mind you, the things, 4 types of housing in front of us are all ones other than ADUs that are licensed, they're businesses. So is there anything in the land use code that if there was a 120 square foot bedroom that was rented to 5 people, is there anything in the health and safety codes, assuming that the property was in good condition, that would allow the city to say that's too many occupants?
There is no provision based specifically on occupant load. Okay. It would be other unsafe or unsanitary conditions that would warrant intervention in that case.
Right. Okay. So that's my understanding as well, which is why I raised this, because there isn't an occupancy limitation in residential. And the reason that we originally had a definition for family is that it was a way to logically manage occupancy. Now we're getting rid of that. And I would note that other than the transient lodging, there is no occupancy limitation on any of these uses. So you could literally have a 300 square foot ADU and put 10, 15 people in there. And that is not safe for those folks. So I'm all for affordable housing, but I want the residents of those folks, as well as the neighbors, to be safe and have it be livable. So whether we adopt the building code at a later date or the International Property Maintenance Code at a later date, we're not adopting it now. We're getting rid of one of the protections of occupancy, which is the definition of family. And there's nothing in place to add as a stopgap measure. So that's why I'm concerned. I want people to be safe. I want Bellevue to be livable. And it needs to, if it's a house that is in good condition, there is no number of limitation that you could put in a house based on the changes. So I understand that my colleagues don't seem to want to get into this, or at least some of you, but I really care about making sure that people are not overpacking buildings and creating a fire code hazard and or severe impacts on the surrounding neighbors. So that's why I was encouraging us to do this. If I knew the city was going to adopt the IPMC in the next 6 months, I would be fine with letting this go as it is. But I'm very, very concerned about having no limitations. So I've said my piece. I appreciate the dialogue. Thank you.
Staff, if we were to adopt it as proposed tonight, and later on decide to put a more the international code application onto that, would that be possible later on, or would that take a major process?
So to review and adopt all or a part of the International Property Maintenance Code would be you know, a significant piece of work. We would have to add it into the work plan and figure out where it would fit. I did mention earlier that it is teed up to be part of the more comprehensive code update that happens with the international codes. And that work will begin next year, probably second quarter of next year, and carry into the following year, 2023.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, any more comments or questions, or yes, Councilmember Barksdale.
I just have one one clarifying point. So if I'm hearing you correctly, Mike, what you're saying is that if there are impacts from too many occupants in a building, we have code rules to enforce against that, right? So is that right?
So the building official or fire marshal would need to determine that we have an unsafe condition. So it'd be more discretionary and less of a number that they're looking at for occupants based on square footage. But they do have the authority to intervene when they determine we have an unsafe condition.
Yeah, I guess my point there is that it's the impact. The reason we're trying to regulate, if I understand it correctly, the number is to get at the impact. So why not just keep, we already have the code and rules to enforce against the impact. Let's just keep those.
Right. So as you've heard, as far as the limits on boarding houses and number of rooms in, you know, an Airbnb, et cetera, those are regulations that remain in place. They're not impacted by this.
Yes.
Except for single family homes and the definition of family and the limits put on by that definition are what are being lifted here. So it does have an impact, but many of the tools remain in place that were put in place in 2015.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, would you like to make a motion?
Certainly, Mayor. I move to direct staff to bring back the proposed ordinance as drafted for council consideration and action at a future meeting.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, it passes 5-2. All right, let's take a 5-minute break. We'll be back at 7:35. Go ahead, Mr. Miyake.
Hey, so good evening, Mayor Robertson and council members. The next item on your agenda is the development services fee update. Tonight's update represents the second installment of the 21-22 mid-biennium update. And just by way of background, the Development Services Department conducts an internal cost of service study each year to assess service levels, financial performance, and to forecast changes in the development activity. The internal cost of service study generally results in some fee changes. Also covered this evening will be the proposed Issaquah and Renton School District impact fee adjustments. So joining us this evening are Mike Brennan, Development Services Director, and Terry Jones, Development Services Fiscal Manager, to review the study results and recommended changes. Also joining us are representatives from both the Issaquah and Renton School Districts to answer questions regarding the school impact fee schedule. For tonight, staff is seeking council direction to prepare ordinances for adoption of the 22 development services fee, as well as the 22 school impact fee schedule. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Mike and Terry.
Thank you, Mr. Miyake. Good evening again, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newhouse, and council members. This is an annual occurrence where we provide an update to the council on our fee study and proposed amendments to our fees. Next slide, please. So this evening, we are seeking direction from the council on these two items, both the proposed fee adjustments for development services and then the school district impact fees that are pass-through fees from both the Renton and Issaquah School District. Next slide, please. So quickly, overview of the agenda, touch real quickly again on the mid-buy calendar that Mr. Miyake just mentioned. Really quick snapshot on development activity update, which we provided to the council in more detail a few weeks ago. We'll walk through the proposed fee and rate adjustments, the school impact fees, and then direction needed from council. Next slide, please. So the Director of Finance and Asset Management, Tony Call, last week walked the council through the mid-buy calendar. This is just another quick overview. So this evening we are providing review of the development services fee update. And then next week would be the mid-buy adjustments in the forecast. And then you can see the rest of the schedule concluding in late November or early December with adoption. Next slide, please. And the actions on adoption would be the list of ordinances that are provided here, the development fee ordinance, development services fee ordinance, the property tax bank capacity resolution, the property tax levy ordinance, and then the kind of umbrella mid-buy budget ordinance, and any other actions that may be directed by the council as we go through the mid-buy budget process. Next slide, please. So this evening, very quickly, as I mentioned, we gave the council an update on development activity in the city, which has been robust, is an understatement, and continues to be moving along at a very brisk pace. We are seeing a lot of mixed-use projects, significant amount of investment in office, much of that driven by the interest in Amazon, locating a significant number of their employees in Bellevue. And we are seeing the growth happening in those areas that are really planned to accept that growth. Next slide, please. Clearly working hard to respond and keep pace. We have bumped our staffing levels up, continue to stay focused on our customer service, even as we are transitioned quickly into the pandemic, as the rest of the community was impacted. So were we, and had to shift very much to an online service delivery for our permitting services. And as you know, our inspectors are on the ground every day out on these job sites, ensuring that they are meeting the building code requirements and the approved plans, and continuing to pay close attention to all of the safeguards that are required responding to the COVID-19 impacts. Next slide, please. So the bulk of what we want to talk about this evening is really the proposed fee adjustments. These fee adjustments maintain alignment with the financial policies that have been established for development services. We adjust our hourly rates that are charged for a number of the permits, so it's charged by hour. We have also fees that are based on the value of the project. Those are value-based permit fees, which are primarily our building permits. And then we have flat rates. So these are the high volume permits that we charge a flat rate for to try to keep the fee structure very as simple as we can. And we update those based on the average time spent and any fee adjustment based on our cost changes. Next slide, please. So the financial management principles that we apply and have applied for a number of years now is that the funding structure should support the DS line of business as we go through economic cycles, the ups and downs of development cycles. The permit applicants should pay for the service that they receive directly, and that the fees need to be predictable and understanding to the customer. Again, some of our flat fees are for that purpose. For the higher volume, smaller scale things, they are charged on a flat basis. And then we need to pay attention to what's going on around us and making sure our fees maintain a regional competitive advantage. Next slide, please. So the cost recovery objectives, and I'll walk through these briefly, but I think they're informative and are a foundation to the way we charge for our services. So starting on the left, the public information and policy development work is 100% supported through the general fund. That is obviously work that we do for the council and policy work, and then public information to the general public to inform them of the permitting processes and regulations in the city. Next to that is the pre-submittal support. So again, getting people close to the door, not in yet, but helping them understand the process, particularly of some of our major developers, and those that are coming from out of town. We spend a significant amount of time upfront trying to make sure there's clarity about the process that they'll need to go through for the development proposal. The first major phase in the review process is our land use and discretionary review, and there's a 50% cost recovery. So half of that is supported through the general fund, and half of that is paid for by the applicant. That is our discretionary or land use decisions. When we move into the more detailed review, engineering review, and or inspection services, those are 100% supported by fees. So the applicant or contractor, developer pays 100% of the cost of our support for that particular part of the permitting and inspection services process. And then we have business support, finance, our permit processing, our technology folks. That again is also supported 100% through our fee structure. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand it to Terry. She's going to walk through, Terry Jones, our fiscal manager. She's going to walk through the proposed fee adjustments for the various fee types as I just described. Terry.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. As mentioned, the proposed fees update is a result of our annual cost of service and fee analysis that we conduct to ensure we are maintaining alignment with our financial policies and our cost recovery objectives. They are routine adjustments to our hourly rates, inflationary adjustments to our valuation-based fees, and adjustments to our one-time flat fees. So this chart explains the building permits, and these permits use the value of the project to set the fees. Routine adjustments to the tables that set the fees are by CPIW and by applying a regional modifier. For 2022, we propose adjusting the tables by CPIW 6.3% and the Washington State modifier of 1.14. The hourly rates are proposed to increase by up to 4% to recover the increase in the costs for services. This chart shows rates that are proposed for land use, transportation, fire, and fire utilities review and inspection. And factors that impact the rates include salary and benefit costs, inflationary M&O, and cost changes for internal overhead, which include recruitment and training for new and additional staff. In 2018, Council approved a 2% surcharge to rates as a result of the cost of service study with a consultant to evaluate our reserve levels. The 2% surcharge was for the purpose of increasing our core staffing reserves, and we have since achieved the recommended reserves, and the surcharge is no longer needed. So we have eliminated the 2% surcharge, and the reduction has offset some of the increases in costs, so you see no change to some hourly rates. In the case of transportation's rate increase, there was an organizational change for development services oversight, which brought more leadership capacity to permit management for transportation permits, and a correction in the cost for the prior year. For some permits, we charge a flat fee based on the average hours of review and inspection time, and the flat fee can vary by the change in the hourly rate and or the average time. Because of this, some flat fees increase and some decrease. Shown are two examples for land use review. On a commercial mechanical permit, there is no increase, and for the right-of-way review on a street use permit, the increase is $71. A couple of valuation-based permit examples include fees for all review and inspection work required to complete the permit. In the case of a tenant improvement project with a value of $100,000, the total change in fee is $289. And for the single family addition of 500 square feet, the total change in fees is $198. To ensure that we are regionally competitive, we've compared our fees to our neighbor jurisdictions. This chart compares the current valuation-based fees for a $100,000 tenant improvement, and Bellevue's proposed fees are the light blue bar for 2022, and just below it is Bellevue's current fee. And you can see that the fees fall between Seattle and King County and are lower Redmond, Kirkland, Issaquah charge lower fees. The next chart is for a 500 square foot single family addition. Again, the light blue bar is the proposed 2022 fee, and just below it is Bellevue's current fee. And again, Bellevue's fees fall in the mid-range between King County and Seattle. And Redmond, Kirkland, Issaquah charge lower rates. Seattle, King County, and Bellevue are jurisdictions with full cost recovery objectives for permit fees, while Redmond, Kirkland, and Issaquah permit costs are part of their general fund. So while these charts compare the fees for the current year, we assume that our neighbor jurisdiction fees for 2022 would also be adjusted upwards. So I'll turn the time back over to Mike.
Thank you. Just wanted to say just a few words about the Issaquah School District and Renton School District impact fee update. And as City Manager Miyake mentioned, we have representatives from both the Issaquah and Renton School District. Thomas Mullins, the Director of Capital Projects with the Issaquah School District, is available this evening should council have any questions. And Tracy Brewer-Rogstad, the Senior Facilities Program Director from the Renton School District, is also joining us this evening. So Issaquah and Renton School Districts charge an impact fee to support their capital programs. These are pass-through fees, so we collect the fee on behalf of the school district for residential development, so both single family and residential, and those fees are transferred directly from the city to the school district where the development is occurring. We again transfer those fees directly. There is not an impact to the city operation with respect to managing that. It's not a significant amount of additional administrative work on our part. Next slide, please. So just remind the council of where the school district boundaries cross over into the city of Bellevue. On the lower right hand or the southeast corner, you can see the ISD or the Issaquah School District boundary as it captures a small segment of the southeast corner of the city. And then the Renton School District, even smaller, down in the Newcastle neighborhood area, just in the southwest part of the city. So development that would occur, residential development would occur in either of those two areas would be subject to the impact fees from the specific school district. Next slide. So the adjustments that the school districts have made to their fees for 2022 are shown on this slide. The Issaquah School District impact fee for new single family development is increasing by $2,078 to $20,291. Their multifamily impact fee is actually dropping $3,690 to $8,353. The Renton School District fee adjustment, impact fee adjustment for single family is decreasing by just over $5,000 to $2,659, and their multifamily impact seeing a modest decrease of $252, and their fee for each multifamily unit at $4,737. Next slide, please. So again, the direction that we are seeking from the council this evening is directing staff to bring forward at a future date, generally happening with the adoption of the mid-buy budget ordinances, the 2022 development services fee, proposed fee adjustments, as well as the 2022 school impact fee update or schedule. Mayor, that completes our presentation for this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to call in this order Councilmember Lee, followed by Zahn, Deputy Mayor Stokes, Robertson, Barksdale, and myself. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to compliment the developmental staff for always doing a great job. You know, I hear a lot of good things about them, and even especially during the pandemic period. You know, everywhere things are slowing down, but Bellevue is going up, and they're still responding amazingly, you know, during this very difficult time, difficult challenge. So I think that the rate that they've established are very reasonable, and they're very supported. And so I would definitely go along with it. And because they do provide service that, you know, to me, it's, you know, the best. So with the school impact fee, as Mike Bender indicated, it's a pass-through. You know, we basically just have no authority really to do much with it. However, we do represent the people who live in Bellevue that go to those two school districts. So I think it would be our responsibility just to maybe making sure that the money is properly utilized and so on. And so I just want to ask one question. Have we heard anything from the residents in those two areas that may have given us input? I haven't received anything, so I don't know whether other council members have or not, but I want to know if the staff has, and this is our responsibility maybe to pass on this information to the school district. That's one question. Second question, I just noticed that Issaquah has such a high amount for single family homes, and I don't quite understand. Maybe you can explain a little bit. And it's still increasing, whereas Renton, just kind of the opposite. So those are the two things, and if you can quickly respond to them, I appreciate it.
So thank you, Councilmember Lee. I'll respond to the first question. I'll have to refer the second question regarding the level of the fee to Mr. Mullins from the Issaquah School District. So we have not received any comments directly regarding the impact fee. And I think even when we collect it, I think it's clear that the fee is being passed through to the Issaquah School District, and the fee is established by the Issaquah School District Board. So we have not, that I'm aware of, heard of anything positive or negative about the impact fee from our staff. Mr. Mullins, as far as the fee, how the fee is established, maybe you could provide some additional information. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Tom Mullins, Director of Capital Projects here at the Issaquah School District. The school impact fee calculations are done by various groups, parts and pieces in various groups in the district, and they come to us to be brought together into a packet and presented. We found an increase. In the last 2 years, 3 years, we've been under construction with a couple schools. We've noticed a dramatic increase in construction costs, which helps drive that up, as have we seen a definite increase in the student factor for the single family. And the student factor is the number of students that come out of every single family home. And so those two factors are what have caused the increase this year. And the construction costs, as I think I looked, we increased it by about 11%, somewhere around in there. So it's fairly dramatic, as is the student factor rate. And those are what are driving that increase in the single family rate.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mullins.
Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you. I also want to express my appreciation, Mike, for the way that you run development services. We're very intentional and thoughtful about how the fees are calculated, doing the study, and making sure that we're comparing ourselves against neighboring municipalities so that we are not way above where others are. So I really appreciate that. As I think about the fact that we continue to have a lot of growth and development, low interest rates on the housing side, low inventory. So a high likelihood that we'll have building retrofits and remodels, and for the commercial as well. I don't think it's related to the fees here, but Mayor and my colleagues, I do want to just mention that as we move forward, I think it would be very helpful as part of our environmental stewardship plan to look at perhaps how we might provide some resources within development services to help folks that are coming in to look at retrofits and remodels of existing buildings, to be able to promote energy conservation and efficiency. So as I think about it though, I would think that we would want to look at that as an incentive for how we actually promote more of that service. So I wouldn't be looking at creating a fee for that, but it may be that as we look at the early wins on the ESI, that we look at that budget to see if there's in a sufficient budget to be able to support Mike's shop in working with the folks coming in for permits, especially in that early period of public information and pre-submittal support, to figure out how we can have a win-win both from a development services standpoint as well as our environmental stewardship. Thanks.
Great. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'll follow my colleagues. A great presentation. Thanks, Mike. I think certainly this is a modest increase and reasonable compared to other municipalities throughout the region. I really just had one question. Actually, it's a great follow-up question from council members on there. How, because you rightly point out 7 years of peak development. How much are we bringing in on a yearly basis on average? And where is that money going? I'm sure there's a lot of folks who are watching tonight and always see the cranes everywhere throughout the city and all the development that's going on. But can you touch on that just a little bit for the public to hear?
So sure, absolutely. So and Terry, I'll have to ask you for the numbers here in just a minute. So we obviously collect fees for our permit services, and as I mentioned earlier, we have cost recovery objectives that the council has established that we set our rates. So there is significant money to pay for a significant cost of managing all of this development, yes, providing inspections. There's also money that comes in on the other in the other ledger. That's our sales tax side, obviously, and you'll hear a bit more about that, I believe, in a forecast that's upcoming here shortly. But as far as our operating budget is concerned, Terry, if you will remind me again of what our annual operating budget is in development services, and then if you could share what was on the revenue side on fees, say last year, for example, for comparison.
Sure. So last year, our operating budget is about $29 million. That is for all of development services costs across the city. And then our revenue that came in last year for that was about $33 million. And much of that revenue came from our building fees that are based on valuation.
Okay, thank you so much. Happy to move this forward. Thank you.
Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I'm ready to move it forward too. I appreciate the work that's being done and the way and what we hear back from developers about how professional the staff is and how we've set up a system that really works well. I've heard other people at different events talking about some concerns at other cities, and so I think that's part of it. And one of the things I think is really smart is the pre-submittal support at no cost. I'm sure that gives you a lot more, probably a better discussions with the developers at the beginning, and an ability to work together because and knowing that you're trying to help them do the best that we need for the city, and not just to charge a fee. And then I think that's a very smart thing to do, and obviously. It works well, and the increase is not that big. So I think it's great. And again, I think I just hear so much very positive things about development services and developers coming in. Obviously, they like to build in Bellevue, so that's good. Yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember Robertson.
Thanks. Oh, I support the changes to development services fees, and I agree. I think it's really good that we don't, I mean, it's generally a cost recovery department, but we do give early support at, the city absorbs that cost as part of helping people get organized and ready for their projects. So I think I still support that. I've always supported that, and I'm comfortable with the changes. I do have some questions about school impact fees, and you'll forgive me, but I've been doing school impact fees in my day job, and I've learned a lot about them. And so that's led me to have more questions about the school impact fees that the Bellevue City Council adopts. So I know that we have 4 districts in our city. Bellevue School District does not charge impact fees. Lake Washington does though. And so why are we not collecting like impact fees for Lake Washington School District?
They have not approached us, so I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I don't know the answer to that, Councilmember Robertson. So we don't reach out to, we don't reach out to the districts. They generally reach out to us.
They reach out to us. Right. And we have the authority to not collect school impact fees if we didn't want to, or to put caps on them. Our code is written so that we do them and pass through, and we always have, but we do have the right if we didn't want to. So the Issaquah School District school impact fee is very, very high. So I am wondering whether and the other thing I learned is that some school districts, because cities have and counties have the authority to put caps on or not pass them through, some school districts will have different impact fee rates depending on where the houses that are or apartments that are being built are located. So my question, and this is I guess for Renton too, but Issaquah is the one that's so big, is whether every part of the district pays the same impact fees as Bellevue is being asked to adopt.
And the answer to that is yes. All of the, we charge the same. We're in, I think, 4 or 5 different jurisdictions, four different jurisdictions, and we propose the same impact fees for all of the areas of the district, which would be the 4 different jurisdictions.
So you propose it, but have all the jurisdictions accepted it?
To date, they have.
Okay.
We're in that process right now.
Okay, because I didn't realize that before I started doing the project.
Yeah, I'm fairly new to this also, and there's a process that each city needs to adopt. King County has a kind of oversees the whole thing, and we propose to them. They kind of give us the go ahead, and then we go out to the 4 other jurisdictions and 3 other jurisdictions and propose. And
okay,
it's always
and in the county they're all paying, they're all charging. Okay, yep. Director Mullins, what percentage of your capital budget is covered by the school impact fees?
Ooh, that's a tough one, to be honest with you. I don't know that number right off the top of my head. I can get that for you.
Okay, yeah, I'd be curious to know, because you're not under the state law, you can't fully fund by impact fees. And since the rates are so high, I'm just wondering what percentage is being funded by impact fees. And then a question for Mike, do we have the most recent capital facilities plan for these 2 districts? And are we getting ready to adopt them? Because we need to update it every year as part of the plan.
I believe so. It hasn't landed on my desk, but they're good about submitting their plan to us. So I would have to check to see where that is. But yes, as part of this process, we do review their plan. They submit it to us each year.
All right. And then I guess just one final question for the districts is whether they have been successfully able to spend all of the impact fees within the 10-year limitation period, or whether they've had to do refunds.
Is that a question for me?
That's a question, if you know. And
yeah, we use them all.
Okay.
The fees, believe it or not, aren't that, I got to be careful how I state it. They're not an exorbitant amount of money when it comes to the overall budget at all. And I can get you examples of how much that would be each year.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know how much, like just a percentage ballpark of what your capital projects are funded by impact fees, as well as, yeah, it'd be good to know with the total collection each year. We're running out of land to develop, so they're probably slowing down. I understand that. And I'd be curious to have that information for Renton as well. That's the end of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Barksdale.
Thank you, Mayor. Mike, thanks to you and your staff and the services that you provide. I support the adjustment for development services and the school impact fees.
Okay, you know, I'm going to go backwards. I share Councilmember Robertson's concerns on the high fees from the Issaquah School District, and I think Bellevue, city of Bellevue, or our school district did a levy for replacing all our schools, and so that's, I guess, a different way to fund it. But that I would be interested in looking at some kind of a cap for fear that they could go up again significantly. That seems like a lot to put on the people in our city in just those areas. So Mike, I appreciate your thoughts on that. And then the other thing is you know, you guys have just knocked it out of the park with your ability to issue permits. During COVID, I think you issued more than you ever have in 2020. So it's been remarkable. And that shift to online permitting right before you had to do it online, I mean, that was a game changer for the city of Bellevue. If we had not done that in advance of COVID, we could not have processed all those permits. So kudos to you and your staff. But anyway, do you have any comments or thoughts on if we want to look at what a cap would, the impacts of a cap, and we wanted to do that down the road?
So that is not something that we have investigated to date. So to follow that path, I would need to consult with the city attorney's office and the city manager's office to figure out what's the process that we would need to go through to enter into that discussion, I guess, with the council and with the school district. So if the council is interested in pursuing that, we can look at that. Maybe that would be something we think about. We're kind of short on time this year, but it's at the council's discretion on how you would want to proceed.
Well, I'd be interested in passing this now and within a year, examining the potential for that. And Councilmember Zahn brought up a good point too. Both of these ideas we can look at in the new year and prioritize how we want to do things. So Mr. Miyake, maybe you could make a list for when we next year. Okay, great. Okay, well, is there a motion, Deputy
Mayor? I move to direct staff to bring back ordinance amending the 2022 permit fees and rates, as well as the school impact fee schedule for council consideration and action at a future meeting.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. That passed. So we are on to our third item, Mr. Miyake.
Yes, Mayor Robertson and council members. The third item is the 2021 annual comprehensive plan amendments. By way of background, each year the city conducts an annual comprehensive plan amendment process. This year, 2 recommended amendments are being transmitted to council this evening with action to occur at a future meeting. The first recommendation is for a map amendment for the Dash, Glendale, and Evergreen Court property on Northeast 8th Street in Wilburton. And the second recommendation relates to multimodal concurrency policies and the comprehensive transportation project list. I'd just like the council to know a significant amount of review and analysis has occurred through both the city's Planning Commission and Transportation Commission. And tonight, staff is seeking the council's direction to return at a future date with ordinances approving the 2021 comp plan amendments. So joining us this evening is Emil King, Assistant Director, and Tara Johnson, Comprehensive Planning Manager, both from the Community Development Department, as well as Kevin McDonald, our Senior Planner from the Transportation Department. Also joining us are Mohammed Malakushian, the Planning Commission Chair, who you just heard earlier this evening, as well as Lorena Marciante from the Transportation Commission, who chairs the Transportation Commission. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Emil.
I'm going to break in here for meeting management purposes and just say that we're going to have the presentation on the annual CPAs for Dash and Glendale and Evergreen Court, and then stop there and take a vote on that and move on to the transportation part of it. So go ahead, Emil. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, City Manager. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of Council. As the City Manager noted, staff and representatives from the Planning Commission and Transportation Commission are here tonight to transmit their recommendations as part of our annual 2021 Comprehensive Plan Amendment process. I wanted to start with just a few opening comments. Bellevue's Comprehensive Plan is a very foundational document for the city, and amendments use a thoughtful process that we hear about tonight. The amendments you'll be presented tonight will help further 2 important topics. The Dash Amendment has a direct tie-in to affordable housing production within walking distance to light rail. And the second set of amendments relate to the city being more efficient and effective with our transportation project capital list, as well as integrating multimodal mobility into our city planning efforts. So I'd like to hand things over to Tara, who will start out with our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Emil.
Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, council members, and members of the public. Just wanted to provide you with, we have a presentation prepared, and thank you, Mayor, for providing that initial direction on how we're structuring our presentation tonight. So we'll start off with providing you with an overview on some of the decision criteria, our process, and then start discussion on the Glendale application. So tonight, the purpose of our study session this evening is to present the Planning Commission's recommendations on the 2021 plan amendments for your review after we've held a public hearing with the Planning Commission in July. The City Council's subsequent action on these recommendations amends the comprehensive plan, which, as Emil mentioned, is Bellevue's foundational policy document. And per state law, we can only amend the comprehensive plan once a year. Under GMA, our Bellevue City Code also allows property owners to propose site-specific comprehensive plan amendments. These privately initiated applications are then reviewed annually, which happened earlier this year by City Council and prior to that, Planning Commission through the threshold review process. Site-specific amendments then could lead to rezoning to ensure that development regulations are consistent and implement the comprehensive plan. City Council initiated amendments do address broader comp plan policy implementation. And of course, this year's includes transportation policy amendments. The proposals are also reviewed by the Planning Commission and acted upon City Council through the final review process, which we'll go over shortly. The process includes staff review, a hearing with the Planning Commission, recommendation by resolution with City Council. I would like to also note that the East Bellevue Community Council had held a courtesy public hearing in July prior to the Planning Commission's hearing on the city-initiated amendments. Their comments and those providing testimony at the hearing were all included as links in your packet. So a little bit on how we're going to structure our presentation. We're just going to touch on the final review criteria, which I'm sure Council is very familiar with, and then we'll switch to an overview on the Glendale proposal and the Planning Commission recommendation, and then pause for City Council to ask questions and provide staff with direction. So on the screen, you'll see the decision criteria that Council is very familiar with. These are the criteria that the Planning Commission used to base their recommendations on. An application has to be found to meet all of the decision criteria in order to be approved. After thorough study, notice, and the final review public hearing, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the 2021 amendments because they found that the application met all of these 5 decision criteria. And then, of course, now we're going to switch into providing you with an overview on each of the amendments and then provide an opportunity for questions and discussion. The 2 amendments that we have before you this evening are Glendale and Evergreen Court, which is a request for about 7.5 acres located on two parcels in the Wilburton Northeast 8th Street area, going from multifamily medium to neighborhood mixed use. And as we've mentioned in our initial comments, the intent is to provide additional opportunity to add more housing density on the site to provide affordable housing. The second set of amendments are city initiated amendments relating to transportation. And there are 2 groups of them. The first amendment entails repealing the comprehensive transportation project list from volume 2 of the comp plan. And then it also includes amending the transportation element to incorporate a multimodal approach. So there are several policies that staff will be going over with you that were the work of the Transportation Commission and then recommended by the Planning Commission. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to our Planning Commission Chair Malkoutian, who's going to walk you through the Planning Commission discussion and recommendation on Dash Glendale.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you for a great job, City Office staff, on these topics and amendments. We discussed the amendments at 2 study sessions, one on June 9 and one on July 7, before the public hearing that held on July 28. The Planning Commission recommends by a 6-0 vote that the City Council adopt the Dash Glendale and Evergreen Court proposal to amend the land use map designation of 2 parcels totaling 7.6 acres in the Wilburton Northeast 8th Street sub-area from multifamily medium to neighborhood mixed use. The Commission found that the application satisfied all land use code decision criteria for final review of the comprehensive plan amendment land use code 20.30I.150. I will give you back, Tara, to finish the slides.
Thank you, Chair. I did want to also touch very briefly on some of the community engagement that occurred throughout the process. Till now, we received a total of 19 letters of support. I believe they were all letters of support. And we also heard testimony from 4 speakers at the public hearing in July, all in support of the proposal. And with that, staff is requesting that council provide direction on the ordinance and provide us with an opportunity to come back to you at a future meeting with an ordinance for approval.
Okay, great, thank you. Councilmember Barksdale, I'll start again with you on this one if you have any comments or questions.
No comments other than I support the recommendation and bringing back an ordinance. Thank you.
Councilmember Robertson.
Support the 2 recommendations. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I too support the 2 recommendations. I just wanted to be clear from Thara, there wasn't any negative feedback then. It was all supportive then, both in the terms of the hearing as well as the final review of comments, correct?
That's accurate. We may have received, I think, 1 letter of concern relating to trees, but the remainder were all letters of support.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, happy to move this forward. Thank you.
Councilmember Stokes.
I vote to move this forward. I think they've done a very good job on this, and it's, I think, an improvement on the projects, an improvement for the area.
Councilmember Lee.
I support both recommendations.
Councilmember Zahn.
I support both. Thank you.
And I do as well. So Deputy Mayor, would you like to make a motion?
Certainly, Mayor. I move to direct staff to bring back an ordinance approving the 2021 annual CPA for Dash Glendale and Evergreen Court for council consideration and action at a future meeting.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Thank you again, Chair Malkoutian, for hanging with us for a long time tonight. You are done. Okay, let's move on to the transportation part of this.
And I'm going to turn things over to transportation staff now.
Thank you, Tara.
Kevin, you're on mute.
Thanks, Emil. Sorry about that. I'd like to introduce the transportation amendments for the comprehensive plan for 2021. There are 2 of them. First is the comprehensive plan amendment to repeal the comprehensive transportation project list from volume 2 of the comprehensive plan. This amendment would rely upon the transportation improvement program as the one comprehensive citywide inventory of transportation projects. And this project list would be considered for prioritization through the TFP and future funding through the CIP. The reason that this comprehensive plan was initiated was because back in 2015, the council consolidated all of the transportation projects that were housed in various places of the comprehensive plan into one comprehensive transportation project list. And while that is useful to have as a source of projects for the TFP, it's duplicative to the work that the council and the commission do on the transportation improvement program. The TIP, upon recommendation from the Transportation Commission after study sessions and a public hearing, is adopted annually by the City Council. And therefore, because it is adopted annually, it becomes more responsive to planning work and engineering work that go into developing the project list. And importantly, projects in the TIP are eligible for grant funding to supplement the CIP. The next slide covers the approach to multimodal concurrency and the policy recommendations for that. The Growth Management Act, of course, requires cities to support land use with a transportation system that meets the demand and is concurrent with that demand. The consequences of not meeting concurrency is that a jurisdiction may not approve new development. So this is a really important threshold to meet. We want to maintain concurrency. Currently, Bellevue employs only a vehicle approach to concurrency, meaning that concurrency can be met only with intersection improvement projects that create the capacity for vehicles to move about the city, but is really not related to a multimodal approach to concurrency. It's a single mode approach. So the multimodal approach, as recommended, would provide capacity for people to move about and the connected networks for all of the modes. It's expected that this approach will accommodate growth and simultaneously satisfy concurrency. Policy amendments in the transportation element are required to embed a multimodal approach to concurrency. Okay, Tara? You know, it's important to realize that this amendment to the comprehensive plan related to the transportation element relate to the comprehensive plan as being a living document, one that evolves with the changing needs of the community. To kind of characterize that, I went through the comprehensive plan and looked, you know, pre-Growth Management Act. In the 1980s, the comprehensive plan spoke to ensuring that traveling on arterials should not be inconvenient or time-consuming or unsafe. And surely that policy has served well over the years. But in 1993, after the adoption of the Growth Management Act, a little bit of nuance was placed into the policy, recognizing that there are vehicle level of service standards that might be different in different parts of the city in light of growth management objectives. So downtown had a different level of service expectation than, say, Eastgate or East Bellevue. And then in the major update of the comprehensive plan in 2015, the council adopted policy that said that provided direction to establish a multimodal level of service approach to concurrency with measures, standards, and targets for each mode of transportation. And in this update of the comprehensive plan in 2021, the Transportation Commission and the Planning Commission have recommended policy amendments to securely embed a multimodal approach to concurrency. So while the Transportation Commission is charged with supporting planned land use, the policy evolves with the changing needs of the community. So the next slide, Tara, relates to the comprehensive plan policies. Recognizing that policy amendments were needed, the council initiated a comprehensive plan amendment in April and directed the Transportation Commission to provide a policy recommendation that would broaden the concurrency standards that would include all of the modes. And after several study sessions, the Transportation Commission prepared a recommendation for transportation elements, looking at the existing transportation policies and determining whether the existing policies should be retained, should be amended, should be repealed, or if new policies were needed. And that Transportation Commission recommendation was forwarded then to the Planning Commission for study session and public hearing, and subsequently recommended by the Planning Commission as well. Next slide. So just a little bit of context for multimodal concurrency. The Transportation Commission has been charged by the City Council to create the first mobility implementation plan for the city. And that mobility implementation plan that the Commission is just about wrapped up work on right now will provide a framework to build a complete and connected network of transportation for all modes. It'll describe the ultimate transportation system. It expands the existing vehicle performance targets to include the performance of intersections at the PM peak hour, and also the travel time along the corridors, because that's how people experience the transportation system when they're in a car. The Commission is recommending performance targets also for the pedestrian, bicycle, and for transit. And in identifying performance targets, the Commission is also identifying where there are gaps in those performance targets. Where in the city are there gaps that need to be addressed with a project that fills those gaps? And with that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to our chair, Gloriana Marciante, who, if she is on the call, I thought I saw her earlier, can review the policy.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Gloriana.
Okay. I'll be fairly quick. Everybody can read the slide. So good evening, council members. Thank you for having us today. We have, what I wanted to share about this is the Commission made significant efforts to create a simple and clear set of policies that would stand on their own and would help citizens understand what this was about. So over the course of 3 sessions, we amended and deleted a number of policies that were perhaps not as relevant to the effort today. And these are the policies that remain. So these were amended, and the new policies address the multimodal elements that Kevin just described. And so that was all that I wanted to share, and I'm happy to take questions later on.
I don't hear anything. Is staff speaking right now?
Is Chair Malakuchian on to describe the Planning Commission recommendation?
Yeah, thank you so much. I first want to say thank you, the Transportation Chair and the committee, for doing an absolute amazing job providing us with all of the information that we needed to make our decision. We recommended by a 6-0 vote at the July 28 public hearing that the City Council repeal the comprehensive transportation project list from Volume 2 of the Comprehensive Plan, and to use the 2022 Transportation Improvement Program and subsequent annual updates as the one citywide transportation project list, and made a recommendation to support the proposed amendment. We also recommended by a 6-0 vote that the City Council adopt the comprehensive plan amendments to the transportation element to incorporate policy that supports a multimodal approach to transportation concurrency as recommended by the Transportation Commission. Commissioners discussed the amendments relating to incorporating multimodal policies into the transportation element, particularly relating to the concerns raised by speakers during public testimony regarding proposed changes to policy TR-2, which currently references reducing congestion. Finally, the Commission recommended with a 3-2 vote amending the initial motion to recommend amendments to policy TR-2, which modify a specific direction regarding congestion reduction and made a recommendation that council address the intent of congestion reduction. We held two separate study sessions in advance of the public hearing, and we found that both amendments satisfy all land use codes decision criteria for final review for a comprehensive plan amendment, land use code 2030I-150. Thank you, and back to the staff.
Tara, next slide. Okay, let me briefly address public comments that both the Transportation Commission and the Planning Commission received. Both the Bellevue Downtown Association and the Chamber of Commerce received briefings on the material prior to recommendation, and both of those organizations support the policy recommendations. We also provided briefings to the East Bellevue Community Council and discussed the proposal with the East Side Transportation Association, and both of those organizations are opposed to the policy recommendation. And they are specifically opposed to the policy amendments for TR2. And I'll discuss that in a second. And various public comments and letters addressed to both commissions had various degrees of support and opposition. And most of that opposition, again, was targeted against policy recommendation for TR2. So as the council is aware, the recommended amendments to policy TR2 have drawn some concerns. And while staff continues to support the Planning Commission and Transportation Commission recommendation for policy TR2, we've offered alternative language to council for that policy that sort of addresses the concern about congestion and inserts language to the intent of managing congestion, along with improving the multimodal transportation system into policy TR2. The next slide, Tara, is just a summary of the public comments that received, again, largely in opposition to the transportation policy amendment for TR2. Then Tara can review the direction sought from the commission or the council tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And so at this point, we've provided council with an overview of the transportation amendments and the Planning Commission recommendation, and the specific recommendation to amend policy TR2 that came from the Planning Commission. And at this point, we're requesting council to direct staff for us to come back to you at a future meeting with an ordinance for the 2021 transportation related amendments to the comprehensive plan.
Okay, thank you very much. We will start, and thank you, Chair Marchianti, for being here tonight, and Chair Malkushin for still being here with us. Thank you. So we'll start with Councilmember Robertson, followed by Councilmember Barksdale, Deputy Mayor Stokes, Liaison, and myself. Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. This is, and thank you to the Planning Commission and the Transportation Commission. I was, as liaison to Transportation Commission, of course, I was involved with the heavy work that the Transportation Commission did before handing this off to the Planning Commission. And I think they had a lot of thoughtful dialogue. They did a lot of good work. And I really support the city moving to a multimodal level of service and concurrency. I think first of all, it reflects and counts all modes, whereas before we were only counting vehicle traffic. We weren't counting people on transit, people on bikes, people on foot, people in maybe some of those employer-run shuttles. And so this will actually measure the different modes and gives credit to them. It also, I think, sets the city up well for the future growth and will reflect the city that we're expecting to have in the future. For example, Amazon is only expecting 50% of their employees to drive to work. So that's a much, much higher mode split than we have seen historically in Bellevue. With the coming of light rail, with hopefully improved bus transit, we're going to see a lot more people opting for other modes of travel besides vehicles. So I think it's really important to measure that and to take it into account when deciding whether a project meets concurrency. So I think that that's really good. The other reason I support this is, as we talk about improving transportation and getting more people where they need to go, there's only so much pavement that we can put down. So what can we do to get more people through? We can use the pavement we have more effectively, which is one of the things we did with our smart transportation system, our smart traffic lights. We can add more pavement, or we can also get people to shift to other modes. And Bellevue has historically done all three. So when we had some members of the public being very worried about removing the word congestion from the draft policies, I was not tremendously worried about it, because I knew as a council member that we're going to continue to make improvements to our roadways for all modes, including vehicles, including bikes, including pedestrians. And we have a levy in place that is partially for congestion in the neighborhoods. But I do understand that the perception by the public was that we're going to take our eye off that ball, in which we were not. So I'm also supportive, and thank the Planning Commission for also having thoughtful dialogue about this. I'm also supportive of adding that language back into TR2. And we can talk about how we might amend that later tonight. But as long as we are continuing to move towards a multimodal system and multimodal solutions for the city of Bellevue in the future, I am very happy with this, and I'm incredibly grateful for the hard work of Transportation Commission and Transportation staff, Planning Commission and Planning staff in bringing this forward to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Just want to echo those sentiments by Councilmember Robertson and say thank you to the Planning Commission for thoughtful dialogue, and the Transportation Commission for visiting us in the Planning Commission. And also I support the recommendation, similar reasons given, and also just given all the conversations we've had about multimodal, the importance of multimodal transportation. And I support the motion that will come later with the alternative language based on the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I want to echo the accolades. Great job to the Transportation Commission and staff, as well as the Planning Commission and staff. This is great work, and I fully agree that Bellevue needs that multimodal concurrency standard that is tied to land use patterns and those urban land districts, and the standard should reflect those urban levels of service and will likely be calibrated towards person trips assigned to transit and non-motorized modes of travel as well. So I'm really happy with this. I think it's fantastic work. Happy to move this forward. I also, though, would like to, in regards to the amendment, and insert back the TR2 language. However, I would also like to bring forward to my colleagues that instead of manage, that we actually say reduce. So strive to manage, or strive to reduce congestion versus manage. But I'll wait for the appropriate time to bring that forward. But again, great work, and thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Stokes.
I too appreciate very much the presentations by staff and the great work by both Planning and Transportation Commission. Also the comments of my fellow council members who have gone before me here. I agree in the recommendations. I don't think we need to change the wording in that. And I'm very, very excited to finally understand that congestion is the problem, is just a simple or description. It's not a way to make any change anything. So I think we're moving on. That's kind of 1990s. I do think it's a very, very comprehensive look at this, and it's taking into account the changes in 2021 and going forward for the next 10 years or more. I'm not, I don't think we need to change the language. I don't think manage is actually a very active and comprehensive word, whereas relieve is again, it's kind of promising, like, you know, congestion is the problem, but it really doesn't think that have the oomph or the meat to move things forward. But that's just kind of semantics. So I think it's a great job, and I think this will be a huge improvement. And the fact that we have such strong support from all aspects of the community, and I've talked to a lot of people, and I think the community as a whole supports this type of approach and will benefit from it. There are a few people who want to stick to the old ways, but things are changing. And I think Councilmember Robertson brought kind of that whole concept up in a very good way, and I subscribe to that. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You know, this goes way back 30 years ago when it established Transportation Commission and concurrency. I was on the first Transportation Commission that was established. In fact, I chaired it. And so we haven't changed the concurrency until now. I think it's very important because it can actually give us the policy direction that we all follow. It's very serious, very important for all of us. That's why I think the Transportation Commission and the Planning Commission pays much attention to actually working at it. And I want to express my appreciation for planning and planning chair and transportation chair. I will happen to be the liaison to the Transportation Commission when we started looking at this. And I think we all support, I personally include, multimodal mode of transportation system. It's a commitment we're making. So, you know, I think it's very important to do that, and we are now recognizing it. And the way we looked at it, you know, with Andrew Singlaka's team as the director, we decided the multimodal implementation, mobility implementation plan is the way to go, because you put all the pieces together, not just isolated, talking about each piece and then connected. This way it's really good. It's efficient. It doesn't have go through all the old CI, you know, we're talking about the list of, projects list and all that stuff. So I think the Planning Commission recognized it. Transportation Commission worked hard on it, took a number of years. I'm very glad that, you know, the President Liaison Robertson works hard to guide and direct them. I think this is a wonderful thing. So I am really happy that we are retaining the congestion as an important piece, but also it's very important that we're making a commitment to multimodal. So both should work. Both are part of our transportation system, especially in terms of all the things that other council members talked about and the staff has been talking about and the both commissions talking about. So I would like to make sure that we don't minimize one and take something away from the other to make one works. So I like to retain what we have, which is reduce congestion and improve multimodal transportation system. So I support Deputy Mayor's thought, and I would like to recommend this is the right vision, the right policy, and there's a concern somebody expressed. I just want to throw it out there. Well, this may not be possible, so why do it? You just use the word manage. So no, implementation is practical. We can do whatever we have to do, but in terms of policy, we got to be bold. We got to be courageous. We got to aim at what we want to do. And I believe the future, with all the things that we're doing, multimodal, encouraging technology, and all the stuff we're working on, improving it here, doing it there, and we'll change our whatever mode of behavior. We will get to the point that we will achieve what our goal and the policy aim at. So I feel that we should take advantage of the hard work, the seriousness, the Transportation Commission, and also the Planning Commission all put into it. Looking at the hard work, we look at making the thing work as a good policy to direct us for the future.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, I join my colleagues in thanking both chairs and both commissions for this work. You know, I remember being on the Transportation Commission in 2015 when we were taking up the multimodal level of service and all of the data and just trying to develop something new from whole cloth because there wasn't a lot of information about how we really would measure multimodal level of service. And so really glad to see that we're at this point where we're ready to adopt it into our comprehensive plan as an element. Especially, you know, we've had some discussions around cars. And I think one of the things that has worked well is when we look at cars, it's not only about intersections, it's about corridors. We certainly learned that in that corridor study in Eastgate that we did a couple of years ago. So I'm glad to see that that thinking is in here about how do we create complete and connected corridors, thoroughfares, networks throughout the city. Because mobility and multimodal, it's well over time for us to take on that piece. And part of it too is I think it's really timely. The light rail coming to Bellevue is going to be quite transformational. And so as we look at creating the kind of options for our community, really looking at how we make sure that our multimodal works as well as possible will feed into our complete streets, our Vision Zero, our safe systems approach, all of the things that transportation is doing that is really making sure that whether you are in a car, a bike, you're walking, you're in a wheelchair, that you're able to actually get around our city as safely as possible. I also have to say that I think one of the best things is also using the 2022 Transportation Improvement Program, because I do remember laboriously going through all of the project list when I was on Transportation Commission. And I think our eyes were bugging out. So the fact that we're actually simplifying that and using the TIP, kudos. I think that is really great. And then lastly, I guess for me on TR2, I might say that having both pieces in there is important. But since we're going to a multimodal level of service, I might recommend for my colleagues that we lead with the second part of the proposed language, which is improve the multimodal transportation system while striving to manage congestion. And so while I've been thinking about whether we manage or reduce, my sense is that we are continuing to grow. So whether a win is managing congestion or truly reducing is probably one that we should have some conversations around here, but I would lead with the second part of what was being proposed, which is improving the multimodal transportation while striving on the congestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Zahn. Yeah, I'm excited about this too. I feel like we're really looking at transportation as a whole. And you know, when the roads don't work on our major arterials and highways, that's when we get the congestion in our neighborhoods and the backup. And I think it's important to keep that congestion aspect in this, but I like Councilmember Zahn's recommendation. I'm fine with relieve, reduce, manage, whatever, but I'm fine with kind of prioritizing the multimodal transportation system first. And I just really appreciate the holistic look at our transportation system and the value put on all the different modes of transportation that are becoming available in Bellevue. And I really look forward to completing our ped bike network so that wherever you are in Bellevue, it's safe to have choices on how you get around. So, Deputy Mayor, I'm going to let you be creative. And let's see. First, we need to make a motion about the transportation amendments, and then you want to add in TR2 in a way that you've decided the majority of the council might feel comfortable with. So
certainly I can do that.
Let's make a motion for the first part, and then we'll amend it.
Okay, then I'll move to direct staff to bring back an ordinance for council consideration and action at a future meeting, approving the 2021 annual CPA for transportation related policy and project list amendments as recommended by the Planning Commission, except policy TR2, which will be amended to read, improve the multimodal transportation system while striving to reduce congestion.
Second.
Okay. Any comments or
I do.
Questions? Okay, Councilmember Lee.
Yes, I agree 100% that both are important. We're talking about a complete transportation system. Madam Mayor, we don't know what the future will be for sure, okay? And I like to not have one over the other. You know, there's 7 of us, so we're going to have different opinions. And there are 150,000 of us in Bellevue, so I don't want to divide. I believe that reducing congestion and multimodal system, both are important, equally important, you know?
Okay,
so why do we take one over the other? So I would like to suggest, you know, I don't care about the order, that's okay, it doesn't matter. But I like to say that strive to reduce congestion or improve the multimodal transportation system and strive to reduce congestion.
Okay, thank you.
So
Councilmember Robertson.
Like ask Deputy Mayor, you know.
Well, I'd like to hear from everybody before we make any
I withdraw
more
my
motions.
official request.
Councilmember Robertson, followed by Barksdale.
He took it back.
Thanks. So I appreciate Deputy Mayor putting the multimodal transportation system first. I think that's a good revision. I've been fiddling with the language, looking at slide 14 and thinking it through as I've listened to all my colleagues. And Deputy Mayor, did you say striving? Was it ing?
You know, I can't actually recall right now if it was striving
so whatever
or strive.
If you said striving, I just want to match the tense. I would add to the end of congestion and improving the travel experience for all users. I really liked that turn of phrase in TR2, the Transportation Commission. I think that it captures a lot and adds to it. So with that friendly amendment of the amendment, I would like to offer that as well.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, thank you.
So, I'm not sure I understand that amendment.
We'll come back to you. Councilmember Barksdale, you had your hand up.
All right, thank you, Mayor. So I do like Councilmember Zahn's change or recommendation to put improving first, and then I would also Councilmember Robertson's suggestion to put it at the end, improving the experience. In terms of manage versus reduce, I guess the way that I think about that is reduce carries a bit more focus, and my understanding of in terms of the intent is to make sure that it's still acknowledged, but we're still focusing on the bigger picture of multimodal. And so I wouldn't want us to get caught up in reduction as opposed like over-indexing or reduction, and sort of keeping the focus on the bigger picture. So my recommendation would be for proceeding with manage.
Okay. So what I have is to improve the multimodal transportation system and reduce/manage congestion. And then what did Councilmember Robertson add?
So I added, God, I had it written down.
Would it be like
it was improve the multimodal transportation system and strive to manage or reduce congestion and to improve the quality of travel experience for all users?
Can we just say while striving to improve?
Sure.
Okay. To improve the what?
Quality of travel experience for all users. That's directly from slide 14.
Excuse me.
Excuse me, Councilmember Lee, I will get to you.
I could not hear anything.
I'm sorry.
I could not hear anything starting with Councilmember Barksdale.
Okay, I'll get back to you. I'm trying to write something down right now. To improve the multimodal transportation system and to reduce and manage while striving to improve the quality, manage congestion while striving to improve the quality of travel experience for all users. That's what I'm hearing as a friendly amendment. Does that consistent with?
Not exactly.
Okay, well, tell me what it is.
Okay, so I had improve, based on Deputy Mayor's motion, improve the multimodal transportation system and strive to reduce, he said reduce, or other people might want manage, congestion and improve the quality of travel experience for all users.
Okay, that's just semantics.
Thank you, Mayor.
I do think manage gives us a lot more leeway than reduce. In the longer run, manages is the overall piece.
Okay, so we will offer it up as one, either reduce or manage. We'll vote on it and assume that, and then we'll take up the other way if we need to. So Councilmember Lee, oh, well, first of all, are there any other questions from anybody or comments? Councilmember Zahn.
Okay, just want to clarify. So that we're first voting on this language where we are going to vote again on reduce or manage. Is that correct? Because my preference is the word manage, but I just want to make sure I'm clear about what we're going to be voting on.
Well, I think it's nice. It's helpful when people say what their preference is right up front, because that makes it easier for me.
Okay,
so,
well, preference is manage. Thank you.
Yeah, I hear that.
Manage.
I heard that from Councilmember Stokes, and I heard it from Councilmember Barksdale as well. So, Deputy Mayor, did you have a comment or question or anything?
No, I think we should continue.
Let's bring Councilmember Lee up to speed here. So Councilmember Lee, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yes.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to direct the staff to return with the attendant general documenting ordinance.
Yes, I heard that.
We are adding TR2 in it to say, improve the multimodal transportation system and strive to manage congestion and improve the quality of travel experience for all users. Now, do you prefer manage or reduce if you had a choice on those two?
I prefer reduce.
Okay, and Councilmember Robertson prefers reduce. I'm trying not to do this as a vote. I'm trying to just get this understood in advance. Deputy Mayor, what's your preference?
As I said, reduce would be my preference.
Okay. Goodness, I really, I'm going to go with staff recommendations since they're the ones who have to do the work. So we're going to keep with manage. So Deputy Mayor, do you have the full TR2 amendment?
No, I think you might have it better than I do at this point.
All right. So,
but do we need to vote first on the amendment that's on the table that was seconded,
well,
or
Councilmember Lee, go ahead.
We have not talked about this last one that Councilmember Robertson proposed. What have we talked about it or agreed that this is the thing that we want to include?
Yes.
That's what we're talking about.
No, we're not talking about that.
Okay, listen.
We're just talking about
any back and forth here.
Manage.
Councilmember Lee.
Yeah.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
I think what we'll do is we'll vote on the motion on the table, which is to direct staff to return with the attendant general documenting ordinance. There's a second for that.
I agree. Yeah. Okay.
So we'll vote on that, and then we'll vote on the TR2 amendment.
Thank you.
Okay. So Deputy Mayor, why don't you make that motion again?
Okay, certainly. I move to direct staff to bring back an ordinance for council consideration and action at a future meeting, approving the 2021 annual CPA for transportation related policy and project list amendments as recommended by the Planning Commission.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, now we're going to talk about the amendment of the proposed TR2 language. Deputy Mayor.
You can make a move.
I can try it.
Yeah.
Although, Mayor, which version would you? Because you
okay,
didn't.
I'm looking for here. I'll make it easy. I'm looking for a motion that states to improve the multimodal transportation system and strive to manage congestion and improve the quality of travel experience for all users. I'm looking for that motion. Is there a so moved?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay.
I'll
Is there a
second.
Excellent. All those in favor?
I'd like to ask a clarification. for travel experience. I don't quite understand that. I would like to have some clarification. What does that mean?
Councilmember Robertson, would you like to explain to your colleague what you were meaning by that?
That was a proposal that was in the TR2 as proposed by the Transportation Commission. It didn't have anything about congestion. It said improve the multimodal transportation system and the quality of travel experience for all users. So making sure that when people are traveling in Bellevue, regardless of mode, that it's a safe, comfortable experience. So Chair Marciente, would you like to weigh in on that, on where the Transportation Commission discussion was on the quality of travel experience for all users? I do remember Councilmember Ting, I think was, or Commissioner Ting was very much supportive of that language. But could you, I don't really remember the full debate.
Yeah, and you're correct, Chair. It's really late.
The council member.
Commissioner Ting was the one that actually came up with that language, and it comes from a lot of conversations that we have. The transportation network is layered, and so we're trying to find the best experience for each mode, in which when you have a very heavy trafficked corridor, a heavy arterial, you don't feel as a pedestrian as safe perhaps, and so you'd rather have a different route as a pedestrian that feels better. And so feels is we talk about a lot about how transportation network feels, because it's not only is it safe, but does it feel safe for a pedestrian, for a bicyclist? And so it's just a topic that we've been discussing in terms of how we feel my travel experiences. You might not mind if you get 1 minute added into traffic, but if you have to sit 1 minute at a light, it feels a lot worse. So that's why we talk a lot back and forth on what the travel experience feels like for users, rather than, and that's where we try to focus on, rather than just, given that we don't quite always understand the technical numbers. So that's the way we talk about it. Does that help?
Thank you. It helps. Yeah. Okay. I understand that. I
Thank you, Chair Marciante. Okay. So we've had a second. We're on the vote. All those in favor?
Are we voting to strive to manage congestion and improve the multimodal transportation system and there's good experience, right?
That is the motion on the table that has been seconded.
Okay, so, could I?
Oh, gosh.
Well,
Councilmember Lee.
Yeah, I'd like to propose, if there's a friendly amendment to change the word encourage or manage to reduce. Would the proposer accept that as a friendly amendment?
No.
Okay.
Who's the proposer?
Don't just say no.
I will not. No, I will not. You asked the question.
Councilmember Stokes, he's asking me, and he's he's asking if he can make a friendly motion, and he can, but it needs to be seconded. So if there's no second, we will proceed with the vote as we're going. Thank you. So all those in favor of the TR2 language as proposed, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so that passes. Thank you. Now we are on to regional issues, which will be quite quick because we do not have a formal presentation, but Lacey Jane, I believe, is going to make comments. And Mr. Miyake, I just took your job away from you. I'm sorry.
That's quite okay. Given the hour, I'd like to just turn over to Lacey Jane, our interim director in intergovernmental affairs. So Lacey Jane, would you like to kick this off?
Yes, I would. Good evening, everyone. In your packet tonight is an updated agreement for the East Side Transportation Partnership, which we often call ETP. And as you all might recall, ETP is convened by King County and is a resource for education, advocacy, and regional leadership for transportation matters on the East Side. Bellevue's been a member since 1987. So this 2022-2023 contract would extend Bellevue's participation by 2 years at a cost of $200 per year. I emailed this draft agreement to y'all on September 30th and didn't receive any questions or comments. Since then, ETP voted to finalize the agreement, and it's now going before all of the member jurisdictions for adoption. So tonight, it's just coming to you as an FYI so that you have an opportunity to ask questions. And then we will include it on your November 1st consent calendar. Staff does recommend approving the agreement next week. And I'm available if you all have any questions. And that's it from me, Mayor.
Okay, any comments or questions from anybody? All right, thank you very much, Lacey Jane. You did a nice write-up in the packet. I do appreciate it. We have come to the end of our meeting. We are going to adjourn and I will see you all later.